Warrior Lore. Chapter 36:17. Ah, Shangguan Yiran? Jingmu Xian? Seeing this strange scene, Kong Hongwu was shocked. He hurriedly unfolded his robe, and his eyes flashed with 3 colors of clear light. Hua! There was a sound like falling into water, and the whole bai and star collapsed. The brilliant starlight instantly dimmed, and as the starlight was annihilated, several light dust fell again. What's going on? Kong Hongwu was inexplicably surprised. This Jingmu Xian star formation was broken by someone? How is this possible? The 4 eyes of the boy and girl rolled around, and there was panic and fear on their faces. Obviously, they knew the seriousness of the matter, so they closed their little mouths tightly and didn't dare to breathe loudly. Kong Hongwu stared at the starry sky formation as if he was thinking about something. After a long while, he looked up to the sky and laughed, as if he had understood something, and said, "Ha ha ha, Hongming old man, you're really good. It seems that you want to make an example of my Star-Lord Palace. I really underestimated you. When I saw your subordinates leave, I thought you didn't dare to come to Yaodai Mountain to make trouble, but I didn't expect you to send Xiao Hua to make trouble. Good. I'm not your opponent, but I'll cut off your claws and teeth. I'll let you know the power of my Star-Lord Palace." After saying that, Kong Hongwu raised his hand, and the sword in Xiao Yun's hand flew up with a clang and landed in the starry sky. Kong Hongwu patted his own head, and a puff. 3-colored air columns spurted out and condensed into a Z in the air. Except for the abnormal skin color, this Z was also dressed in a Confucian robe and looked like a real person. This Z stretched out his hand, and the sword fell into his hand. Immediately, jumping inscriptions flew out from the sword, and the inscriptions made a clear chanting sound. The chanting sound was full of rhythm and strands of noble qi, which were as thin as hair but condensed with terrifying power, came out of the void and crashed into the inscriptions. Layers of extraordinary splendor mixed with clouds gushed out from the surface of the inscriptions. In the time it took to eat a meal, the inscriptions on the whole sword rushed into the air and condensed into the appearance of a golden-armored celestial man. "Please." Kong Hongwu lightly opened his mouth and spat out a word. Thousands of rays of light flew out of the Z's mouth and landed on the forehead of the golden-armored celestial man. The rays of light converged and turned into the inscriptions of the sun, moon, and star. Then, the Z waved his hand and pointed the sword at the center of the 3 inscriptions. The golden-armored celestial man flashed with an intense golden light and rushed into the starry sky. Boom! With a soft sound, the golden-armored celestial man disappeared. At the same time, a blood-red star with a long tail flew out from where the golden-armored celestial man disappeared. On top of the star, there were shadows of the sun and moon that were flashing with different colors of clouds. Xiao Hua retracted his gaze from the horizon and released his Buddhist sense to check the area again. He didn't find anyone alive. Only then did he fly to the place where Reverend Shangtian was killed. Reverend Shangtian's corpse had been split into 2 and looked very bloody. Xiao Hua waved his hand, and a samadhi true fire fell and burned the corpse. He then raised his hand and took a few chinkuan bags. Xiao Hua opened them and looked inside. There were many things inside. Xiao Hua didn't have time to look at them carefully and casually threw them into his space. Daoist Xiang Tian's cold plum flying sword was also thrown to the ground. However, this sword was Daoist Xiang Tian's life treasure. Since Daoist Xiang Tian's nascent soul was holding a small sword, even if Xiao Hua erased the origin soul imprint on it, it wouldn't be of much use. However, Xiao Hua only hesitated for a moment. He raised his hand, and the cold plum sword fell into his hand. Without the slightest hesitation, he erased the nascent divinity within it and put it away. A magic treasure painstakingly refined by a nascent soul cultivator could definitely be given to an ordinary core formation disciple. It's here. At this moment, a cultivator's hoarse voice sounded. Xiao Hua looked up and saw that it was one of the cultivators that Taoist Yuan Qing sent to search for the jade box. Xiao Hua urged his body to fly towards that person. The other 4 people also stopped searching and flew towards that person's location. When Xiaohua arrived, that person had already taken out the jade box from the collapsed mountain rocks. This place was already very far from the cliff where the jade box was previously placed. Moreover, the surrounding mountain rocks, debris, and fallen ancient trees were all present. It was really a mess. From time to time, there would be some fog, weak wind, and other things rushing out. If one didn't look carefully, it would really be difficult to find it. That person was slightly thin and his face was pale. When he saw Xiaohua fly over, he hurriedly handed over the jade box and said with a smile, "Senior Xiao." Xiaohua glanced at the jade box and said indifferently, "Wait a moment. Let's wait for them to arrive." Yes, that person didn't dare to say anything else. He held the jade box in his hand and stood in the air. Seeing that Taoist Yuan Qing and the others still hadn't arrived, Xiaohua asked again, "How should I address you, fellow Taoist?" "Senior Xiao, you're too polite. I'm Taoist Jingting." Taoist Jingting was flattered when he heard Xiaohua call him fellow Taoist. "You found this thing, so it should be yours. However, I need the Imperial Preceptor's lot. If it's the lot of the Imperial Preceptor, then it belongs to me." Xiaohua said, "However, I'll give you some compensation." "I wouldn't dare." Taoist Jingting said hurriedly, "With Senior's ability, finding this thing is as easy as lifting a finger. It's my honor to be of service to Senior. Even if it's the 3 treasures mentioned by Starlord Palace, I'm willing to offer them to Senior." "Oh?" Xiaohua stared blankly for a moment, somewhat puzzled. He rubbed his chin, embarrassed by his own deterrence. Although he was somewhat puzzled when he saw Xiaohua, Taoist Jingting didn't explain much when he saw Taoist Yuan Qing and the others flying over. He just waited quietly on the side. When Taoist Yuan Qing saw the jade box in Taoist Jingting's hand, a smile immediately appeared on his face. He cupped his hands and said, "Congratulations, Senior." "Hee, congratulations, congratulations." Xiaohua nodded slightly. Taoist Yuan Qing took out a few more jade boxes from his bosom and handed them to Xiaohua, saying, "Also, these are some spiritual herbs and spiritual objects that Junior found nearby. Senior saved Junior's life. Junior has nothing to repay Senior, so I'll take these as my thanks to Senior." Xiaohua took a deep look at Taoist Yuan Qing and didn't refuse. He took them with a smile and said, "Since that's the case, I'll accept these things. Fellow Taoist Yuan Qing, you don't have to keep talking about your so-called kindness. I'll listen to Taoist Zhao's instructions." Taoist Yuan Qing was very happy. After answering respectfully, he stood to the side. Xiaohua understood. So how could the other 3 nascent soul cultivators not understand? They all took out a few jade boxes from their chinkuan bags. Who knew if they found them in such a short time? They all handed them to Xiaohua. Xiaohua took them one by one without hesitation. He roughly looked at them and sent them into his space. Then, he looked at Taoist Jingting and said, "I've always liked to be magnanimous. Although I didn't say it clearly and only asked you to help me find the jade boxes, the things inside the jade boxes." Soon after, Xiaohua repeated what he had just said to Taoist Master Jingting. Only then did he order Taoist Master Jingting to open the jade box. Inside the jade box, there was a flash of brilliance and a faint, mighty roar of a beast rushed into the air along with the jade box. Xiaohua's eyes slightly narrowed, revealing a happy expression. He could already clearly see that under that brilliance, there was a swan wand-shaped imperial jade seal. "Congratulations, Taoist Xiao." Taoist Jingting also slightly closed his eyes because of that light, and then he shouted with a happy expression, "Haha." Seeing that it was the State Preceptor's lot that he needed, Xiaohua didn't hold back. He covered his Taoist robe, and the State Preceptor's lot fell into his hand, instantly disappearing. Taoist Yuan Qing and the other 4 nascent soul cultivators also opened their mouths to congratulate him, but the smiles on their faces carried a trace of bitterness. More than 10 nascent soul cultivators risked their lives, and so many of them died. Who would have thought that the jade boxes only contained the State Preceptor's lot? How could they not feel wronged? Of course, their congratulations were sincere. After all, the State Preceptor's lot wasn't what they wanted, and Xiaohua taking it wouldn't make them feel pained. Xiaohua received the State Preceptor's lot, and this trip was complete. Then, he asked with a smile, I've already achieved my goal of participating in the Jadestige meeting. I'm not going to go any further. I'll just wait here until the Jadestige meeting is over and leave. Fellow Taoists, if you still have other ideas, feel free to go. Taoist Master Xiao, the somewhat short nascent soul cultivator, said regretfully, with your skills, how can you stay here? Not to mention that any one of those 3 treasures is useful to you. Even the spiritual grasses and spiritual items in other places of the Jadestige Mountain are incomparable to other places of the hidden immortal continent. Don't you want to get 1 or 2? Xiao Hua said with a smile that wasn't a smile. If I were to snatch those 3 treasures, wouldn't you all be empty-handed? Those things are useless to me, so I'll leave them for you. The short nascent soul cultivator's face was somewhat embarrassed, and he said in a low voice, since Taoist isn't willing to go forward, then this junior will take his leave first. If Taoist has time in the future, please come to Pingyu Lake. This junior will welcome you with open arms. Okay, you can go. Xiao Hua waved his hand and said to Taoist Master Yuan Qing, Taoist Master Jing Ting, and the others. However, just as he finished speaking, he immediately thought of something and hurriedly said, Oh, don't worry, I just remembered something. I don't know which fellow Taoist can help me. When the short nascent soul cultivator heard this, his face was very happy. He had the same thoughts as the others. They all wanted to follow Xiao Hua. This way, even if they encountered any danger, they could ask Xiao Hua for help. However, they didn't expect that Xiao Hua didn't intend to go forward at all. At this time, hearing Xiao Hua's words, the cultivator hurriedly said, I don't know what Taoist master wants to do. Oh, it's nothing. I just want to ask you, who knows about the heavenly soul, earthly soul, and mortal essence? Xiao Hua said with a smile. -13. Chapter 36:18. When the short nascent soul cultivator heard this, he couldn't help but stare blankly. Looking at the 3 people beside him, they all looked confused. He slightly shook his head and said, I have never heard of it. Hee, no matter. Xiao Hua smiled and waved his hand. If you don't know, then don't know. At this moment, Taoist Jingding said calmly, I know what Taoist Jingding is talking about. Moreover, I also know that there is one in Yaodai Mountain. Is that so? Xiao Hua was pleasantly surprised. He looked at Taoist Jingting and said with a smile, if fellow Taoists can help me, I definitely won't treat you unfairly. Taoist Jingting seemed to have made some decision. He lightly bit his lips and said, Taoist Jingting and I can be considered to be fated. If Taoist Jingting can obtain that thing, I ask Taoist Jingting to share some with me. Of course. Xiao Hua agreed without hesitation. There is no need to doubt this. Good. Taoist Jingting made a prompt decision. He cupped his hands and said, if Taoist Jingting is willing, I will take Taoist Jingting there. However, that place is rather dangerous. The other fellow Taoists shouldn't rashly take risks. When the short nascent soul cultivator saw that Taoist Jingting had already said this, he hurriedly bowed and said, I wish Taoist Jingting success. Farewell. After he finished speaking, he urged his magic power to leave. At this moment, he heard a very distant place, the location of that Yaodai Mountain. Rumble. The sound of mountains and tsunamis reverberated through the entire sky. Xiao Hua and the others looked up and saw a blood-red meteor rushing out from the peak of Yaodai Mountain. It went straight to the top of the sky, and then with a large blood-red tail, it rushed from the top of the sky to the other end of the mountain range. As the meteor streaked across, the blood-red color was like a sharp sword cutting open the sky. A long bloody scar appeared in the sky. Not only that, but the sky before the meteor was extremely trembling. A myriad of multicolored lights burst out from the front of the meteor. After the meteor, that long red tail seemed to be overflowing with ripples, expanding the bloody scar to the extreme. The sky was filled with blood-red multicolored lights in an instant. Not only did they cover the clear sky, but they also covered the sun and the moon. That night and blood could be seen with the naked eye rushing towards Xiao Hua and the others from a distance. What is going on? The short nascent soul cultivator was shocked. His body, which had been flying away, came to a stop as he looked into the distance in shock. Strands of heaven and earth yuan qi, as well as streams of righteous qi, slowly surged into the sky. It was as if blood had fallen into a pool of water. The blood-colored rays of light were descending towards Yaotai Mountain at a speed visible to the naked eye. Rumble. The sound of thunder and claps of thunder seemed to be the only sound in the world, reverberating back and forth. Not only did the blood-colored meteor streak across the horizon, it even cut open the hearts of all the cultivators. An indescribable restlessness, viciousness, and brutality unknowingly diffused out from their hearts. A rare treasure? The short, nascent soul cultivator had just stopped, and his attention fell on the blood-colored meteor when he saw jade boxes flickering with brilliance and clouds rushing out from all directions. Behind the jade boxes were many cultivators. These cultivators were either activating their magic treasures or using their abilities. They were all extremely excited. Unfortunately, the majority of the jade boxes immediately disappeared into the blood-colored rays of light when they rushed into the air. Only a few landed in the hands of the cultivators. Those who obtained the jade boxes either turned around and flew away or directly rushed forward, disappearing with the other jade boxes. Those who didn't obtain the jade boxes naturally didn't want to fall behind. They immediately rushed into the blood-colored rays of light and disappeared. As for more cultivators, they were hesitant. After all, this blood-colored meteor was an ominous sign. Who knew what was inside the rays of light? However, wherever the meteor passed, the blood-colored scars didn't disappear. The rays of light spread downwards bit by bit without any intention of stopping. Some cultivators who were close to the rays of light didn't even need to move their bodies. Once they came into contact with the rays of light, they immediately disappeared. Seeing this, how could the cultivators not know that Star-Lord Palace's intention was to let all the cultivators enter the rays of light? Rather than waiting here to be sucked in by the rays of light, it was better to enter the rays of light now and obtain the rare treasure a step earlier. Thus, even more cultivators flew out from the continuous mountain range and rushed into the rays of light, disappearing without a trace. The short, nascent soul cultivator looked at the treasures falling into the rays of light with greed in his eyes. Seeing that there were cultivators rushing into the rays of light, he immediately cupped his hands and said, "Taoist Master Xiao, I'll go first." "Please." Xiao Hua nodded. That nascent soul cultivator urged his body and rushed up 100 feet. Once he came into contact with the blood-colored rays of light, he disappeared like the other cultivators. Xiao Hua's divine sense followed. He only felt that the rays of light could isolate divine sense, but he couldn't see anything strange about it. "Fellow Taoists, hurry up and go," Xiao Hua urged, then said to Taoist Master Jingting, "Fellow Taoist Jingting, you can lead the way. From the looks of it, Star-Lord Palace wants to drive us to a place. The defensive formation from before might be closed." When Taoist Master Jingting heard this, he immediately understood. He hurriedly nodded and said, "Taoist Master, please follow me." As he said this, Taoist Master Jingting also urged his body and flew towards a place. The other nascent soul cultivators cupped their hands towards Xiao Hua and also rushed into the rays of light somewhat hurriedly. They originally had some intention to go with Xiao Hua, but when they saw that Xiao Hua wanted to break through the formation again and didn't want them to follow, especially when all the rare treasures were sent into the blood-colored rays of light by Star-Lord Palace, all the cultivators on Yaodai Mountain had to enter the rays of light to obtain the rare treasures, so Xiao Hua's role was weakened. Therefore, they also dispelled the idea of advancing and retreating with Xiao Hua. Taoist Master Yuanqing looked at the nascent soul cultivator who flew away, his face unmoved. He calmly said to Xiao Hua, "Taoist Master Xiao, Junior's cultivation is limited. I'm afraid it won't be easy for me to escape from Yaodai Mountain. I can't not follow you. You won't drive me away, right?" "Haha, how is that possible?" Xiao Hua laughed. His body flew up and rushed out after Taoist Master Jingting. He even said, "But if you want to follow us, don't call me senior in the future." Taoist Master Yuanqing laughed. His Taoist robe fluttered as he chased after Xiao Hua. He also said, "Taoist Master Xiao, if you say so, how can I not follow your orders?" The three of them flew towards this place for about the time it took to eat a meal. Just as Xiao Hua thought, the entire Yaodai Mountain was completely covered by the rays of light like volcanic clouds. Under the rays of light, rare treasures, and spiritual objects flew out one after another. Not to mention that the defensive formation was gradually closing. Even if it wasn't, who would still stay here when the formation was empty? Jinren Jingting saw them flying over several mountain ranges, flying and stopping. In the ancient forest, which was more than 100 feet high, they found a sandbar where 3 streams converged. Jinren Jingting stopped. He turned his head and narrowed his eyes to look at the multicolored light falling from above and behind him. He said, Jinren Shao, this is the place where the elites are. Although the rays of light will activate the defensive formation, it's 90% similar to the records I've obtained. Xiao Hua's divine sense swept out. He saw that the vast qi above the sandbar was mixed with obscure inscriptions that blocked his divine sense. He knew this should be one of the defensive formations of Starlord Hall. He then looked at the lush ancient trees on the left side that blocked the blood-colored rays of light. If Taoist Master Jingting didn't bring him here, he probably wouldn't have found this place. So Xiao Hua said with a smile, Fellow Taoist Jingting, before I came here, I also asked several fellow Taoists for advice. According to them, this Yaodai gathering is completely different from the previous one. There's nothing to learn from them. I wonder how fellow Taoists got the information about this place? Reverend Jingting looks at Xiao Hua, then looks at Reverend Yuanqing, who is following behind him. He sighs and says, To tell you the truth, Reverend Xiao, I didn't get this information from anyone else. It was during the last few Yaodai gatherings that I came here by chance and found out. Oh? Xiao Hua was surprised. Could it be that fellow Taoist Jingting has attended the Yaodai gathering many times? Not to mention Xiao Hua, even Taoist Master Yuanqing looked at Taoist Master Jingting with interest. A bitter smile appeared on Taoist Master Jingting's face. He nodded and said, I'm not afraid of Taoist Master Zhao's joke. This is the 13th time I have attended the Yaodai gathering. Xiao Hua didn't make a move, but Taoist Master Yuanqing cried out in surprise. However, after being surprised, Taoist Master Yuanqing became somewhat embarrassed. He said with a smile, Fellow Taoist Jingting, you think too much. This Yaodai gathering is also the 3rd time I've attended. You've only attended a few more times than me. I'm afraid I'm the pot calling the kettle black. Alas, Taoist Master Jingting sighed. His voice was full of bitterness and helplessness. He looked at the sandbar in front of him and said, Fellow Taoists, please don't laugh at me. Actually, the purpose of this humble Taoist's visit to Yaodai Mountain is not for the treasures mentioned earlier. This humble Taoist is also not interested in the 3 treasures that Star-Lord Palace has taken out. This humble Taoist's purpose is the same as that of Taoist Xiao. Oh. Xiao Hua raised his eyes to look at Taoist Master Jingting and asked curiously, could it be? Fellow Taoist Jingting has attended the Yaodai gathering 12 times just for the Imperial Preceptor's lot? And 12 times, you actually didn't get it? Taoist Master Yuanqing was also surprised. After all, it wasn't particularly difficult to get the Imperial Preceptor's lot when one's cultivation had reached the middle nascent soul stage. As long as one's luck wasn't too bad, one could get it by attending the Yaodai gathering once. How could one be like Taoist Master Jingting, who had attended the Yaodai gathering 12 times and still hadn't gotten it? Taoist Master Jingting originally wanted to urge Xiao Hua, but when he saw Xiao Hua looking at him with great interest and seemed to have already released his divine sense, he knew that Xiao Hua was observing the defensive formation in front of him. Thinking of his own decision, he opened his mouth and said, You're right, Taoist Master Xiao. Since I attended the first Yaodai gathering 400 years ago, I've attended the Yaodai gathering 12 times in the past several hundred years and returned empty-handed. I didn't get the Imperial Preceptor's lot even once. Fellow Taoist Jingting, you really have perseverance. Taoist Master Yuanqing didn't know how to comfort Taoist Master Jingting, so he could only say this in a low voice. Actually, the first 3 times, I really did want to establish a country and have the ambition to be a country's teacher, Taoist Master Jingting said with a smile, but by the 4th time, the general who was on good terms with I was already old. Seeing that I couldn't help them establish a country for a long time, his son had already abandoned I and cooperated with others. I also met the fellow Taoist who helped them establish a country. I also met him at the Yaodai gathering. I can't help others, but of course, I can't disturb them. Therefore, the things that happened after that were just me acting in a fit of pique. I actually want to see how many times I can get the Imperial Preceptor's lot. -13. Chapter 36:19. After Xiao Hua's divine sense landed on the defensive formation and carefully observed it for a moment, he unconsciously frowned slightly. This defensive formation was rather strange. It was like a lock covering the sandbar. The three streams rushing in from all directions were like keys to the lock. The defensive formation could only be opened by the streams. However, there was a faint strangeness in the streams, which contained a murderous intent. Xiaohua felt that it was somewhat familiar, but also difficult to grasp. He had no choice but to think more about it. Fellow Taoist Jingding, how did you enter this place last time? Xiaohua seemed to have a plan and asked. Reverend Jingting said without hesitation, when I participated in the Yaodai assembly for the first time, I had already obtained the Imperial Preceptor's lot on a mountain range not far from here. Unfortunately, before I could put it in my Qinkuan bag, I was discovered by another fellow Taoist. This fellow Taoist was more powerful than me, so I was thrown into that stream. In order to escape that fellow Taoist's pursuit, I used the water escape technique to hide. Who knew that a very inexplicable force would bring me into that sandbar? It's just that I only entered the sandbar for a very short time. I was only able to see the situation inside before I was brought out. Later on, by chance and coincidence, I found out that inside was the Renjing that ordinary Taoist cultivators of my sect talked about. Alas, since I knew this thing was the Renjing, I had to come here every time I came here to take a look. However, apart from the first time, this was the only time I could see the surrounding ancient trees. In the past several hundred years, Star-Lord Hall never opened this place. This time, I don't have much time left. Xiaohua looked at the place that was only a few li away. The edges of the ancient trees were already blurred, as if the blood-red light had swallowed the ancient trees. Moreover, under the cover of the light, all the mountains, forests, and streams could no longer be seen. Only the distant Yaodai Mountain stood tall like a pillar that reached the sky. Upon seeing this, Reverend Jingting straightened his clothes and bowed to Xiaohua. Reverend Xiao, in fact, when I obtained the jade box containing the Imperial Preceptor's lot, I had a premonition in my heart that the jade box contained no other treasure but the Imperial Preceptor's lot. Why? Reverend Yuanqing was somewhat puzzled. If you didn't have a premonition, why did you fight for it? Taoist Jingting said very meaningfully, I naturally fight for the State Preceptor's lot, but if I can't get it, then it's naturally not the State Preceptor's lot. However, Jinren Shao killed the Guardian Star and asked us to search for it. The only thing I could find was the Imperial Master's lot. Taoist Master Jingting's words were very awkward, but Taoist Master Yuanqing also understood a little. Taoist Master Jingting's luck was extremely bad. This was his 13th time participating in the Yaodai assembly. The number of the Imperial Preceptor's lot was pitifully small. This was the first time he was so close to the Imperial Preceptor's lot, but he just happened to encounter the unstoppable Xiaohua. Even if he could get the Imperial Teacher's lot in his hands, in the end, he would have to give it to Xiaohua. As Taoist Jingting spoke, his figure didn't get up. Since the heavens let me present the Imperial Preceptor's lot with both hands, then it's also letting me serve Taoist. I hope that Taoist Xiao can guide me when you establish your country in the future. Taoist Yuanqing's eyebrows twitched as he forced a smile. He glanced at the silent Xiaohua and said, Fellow Taoist Jingting, I'm afraid this isn't your true reason, is it? Yes, this is a reason, but it's not the most important one. Taoist Jingting didn't quite understand the relationship between Xiaohua and Taoist Yuanqing, but seeing that Xiaohua didn't speak and only Taoist Yuanqing spoke, he thought Xiaohua didn't quite believe him. He hurriedly said, The most important thing is that I really don't have confidence in myself. I must rely on a senior with destiny. Taoist Xiao controls the national treasure of Confucian cultivators, so you're definitely a person with great destiny. If I don't rely on Taoist Xiao, who else can I rely on? Taoist Yuanqing blinked his eyes and said with a smile, So that's how it is. I thought fellow Taoist was as afraid of death as I, Being afraid of death is naturally one of the reasons, Taoist Jingting said with a smile. Xiao Hua looked at Taoist Jingting's bowing appearance and nodded. As early as when fellow Taoist Jingting gave me the jade box, I already promised you that I would take out something of equivalent value to the treasures inside the jade box to exchange with fellow Taoist. Since fellow Taoist wants to use his own future to exchange with me, I naturally feel ashamed to accept it. When Taoist Jingting heard this, his face was filled with ecstasy. He shouted, "State Preceptor, please accept this subordinate's bow." Haha, fellow Taoist is too polite. Xiao Hua raised his hand and helped Taoist Jingting up. Since you want to work for me, I will certainly not treat fellow Taoist unfairly. As long as I can give you anything, I will satisfy fellow Taoist. Taoist Yuan Qing's face showed a trace of surprise. He also said with a smile, "Congratulations, Taoist Xiao." "Congratulations, fellow Taoist Jingting." Huh? Xiao Hua was about to raise his head to answer when suddenly his eyebrows rose and he let out a cry of surprise. He immediately waved his hand and grabbed Taoist Yuan Qing and Taoist Jingting out of thin air. Without waiting for the two to speak, he dragged the two of them and rushed to the nearby sandbar. Taoist Jingting and Taoist Yuan Qing were slightly stunned. However, when their divine senses swept over the sandbar, they saw that under the blood-red brilliance, near the upper wind of the second stream, an inexplicable aura rushed out. The originally disorderly inscriptions immediately swarmed up. That aura was like a sharp blade that cut open a flaw in the defensive formation. "There's someone inside," Taoist Jingting exclaimed in a low voice and looked at Taoist Yuan Qing. The two of them looked at each other with surprise. The inscriptions were like a fountain, and the noble spirit swarmed out. This noble spirit was like an incomparably sharp flying sword, and it slashed in the air with a whooshing sound. Strands of fine texture appeared in the void, and the white clouds were turned into nothingness by these fine texture. Xiao Hua brought the two of them with him. His whole body flashed with a faint golden light. This golden light also made cracking sounds in the fine lines and shattered into pieces. However, the moment it shattered, the golden light condensed again. "Go!" Xiao Hua landed in the middle of the inscriptions and waved his hand. A ray of brilliance appeared, like a huge fist crashing into the inscriptions. Boom! Thousands of inscriptions were forcibly suppressed. The place where the aura appeared was torn apart by this fist. The aura that rushed out became more and more violent. However, just as the aura rushed out, an ear-piercing beast roar was heard from within the crack. The aura suddenly converged, and even a kind of weakness and helplessness leaked out from the aura. Demonic beast! Xiao Hua was slightly stunned. He made a hand seal to protect himself and the others. As his body crashed into the crack, his divine sense rushed inside. "Oh, this is somewhat interesting." Xiao Hua landed in the defensive formation. His divine sense had already seen the situation inside the formation clearly. His face unconsciously revealed an expression of interest. He saw that this place was several acres in size. 3 streams rushed into the sandbar, dividing the sandbar into 3 parts. And the 3 streams converged at the center of the sandbar. A layer of watery splendor rushed out from the center of the sandbar, covering a part of the sandbar. Moreover, with Xiao Hua's divine sense, he had already sensed the mana fluctuations of this splendor. What was covering a part of the sandbar was actually a Taoist magic array. Looking above the sandbar, the aura that rushed out of the defensive formation came from a demonic beast that was several tens of meters in size. This demonic beast had long ears, blood-red eyes, and a 3-petaled mouth. It was very similar to an ordinary rabbit. However, this demonic beast's fur was brownish-red, and its tail was several tens of meters long. How could a rabbit compare to the bloodthirst in its eyes and the vicious aura on its huge demonic body? Below the demonic beast's body, 2 forelimbs that were like human arms were currently covered in a scarlet ring of fire. This ring of fire burned with flames that were several feet high, roasting the demonic beast's forelimbs black. A pungent smell pervaded the air. Not only that, but above the demonic beast's head, a 3-pronged trident that was more than a foot long was emitting a 3-colored brilliance that firmly covered the demonic beast's head. The demonic beast's thunderous roars could not be heard. In front of the demonic beast, there were several nascent soul cultivators who were flying in a circle in midair. The three at the front were forming hand seals and activating their magic treasures. The four at the left were holding magic treasures in their hands and coldly looking at a female cultivator wearing dark reddish-purple clothes behind the demonic beast. Xiao Hua brought Taoist Yuan Qing and Taoist Jing Ting into the defensive formation. The seven of them were immediately alerted. However, when everyone scanned them with their divine senses, they saw that the three people activating their magic treasures were not alarmed at all. It was as if they had just seen a passerby. On the other hand, the other two people were surprised but also had a trace of ridicule. Xiao Hua also knew these two people. Weren't they the two cultivators that Xiao Hua had met on the night before he entered Mount Yaodai and participated in the trade fair? One was Taoist Shifan, and the other was Taoist Chu. This was what they meant by enemies are bound to meet. Xiao Hua could clearly see the two people's ridicule. His heart was unconsciously moved, and he looked towards the formation below him. As for Taoist Jing Ting, as soon as he entered the defensive formation, he was immediately attracted by the rabbit-like demonic beast. His gaze had already fallen on the female cultivator wearing dark reddish-purple clothes. He saw that this tall female cultivator looked to be in her 20s. The purple clothes she wore accentuated her curves. The woman's appearance was elegant, and she had an oval face with a small nose that was slightly raised. Her most attractive feature was her pair of eyes. The woman's eyes weren't large and were apricot-shaped. Under her thin eyelids, her flowing gaze was like water ripples. The woman's gaze swept past Xiao Hua and the others. Immediately, a kind of faint sadness emerged in everyone's hearts. This sadness seemed to be a reflection of the female cultivator's unfortunate life, but it also seemed to be a kind of pity for the female cultivator. Because at this moment, the woman's face was pale and flushed. Obviously, she was injured. On top of the woman's head, a simple and unadorned jade pendant emitted a misty brilliance that firmly enveloped the woman. However, this brilliance was as thin as paper. It seemed that any random magic treasure could break through the woman's defensive magic treasure. Seeing that another person had rushed into the defensive formation, the demonic beast opened its mouth and roared. Its body struggled with all its might, and a kind of dense demonic fog sprayed out from its mouth. However, under the confinement of the trident, that dense fog couldn't reach very far. Even the demonic beast's twisting body overflowed with runes. These runes were like ropes that trapped the demonic beast. -13. Chapter 36:20. Oh, fellow Taoist Jingting, could it be you know this female cultivator? Xiao Hua withdrew his gaze from the formation and turned to look at Master Taoist Jingting, asking in a low voice. When Master Taoist Jingting heard this, he hastily said, reporting to Master Taoist, I do know this female cultivator. Didn't I tell you before? I've been here many times in the past 400 years, and I've met this female cultivator twice. Her name is Li Jing, and her Taoist name is Fairy Jing. Oh? Xiao Hua looked at Master Taoist Jingting with a smile that wasn't a smile and said, It seems this Fairy Jing has the same idea as fellow Taoist Jingting. It seems so. Master Taoist Jingting looked at Fairy Jing's struggling appearance and sighed. Although we didn't have a deep conversation on those two occasions, I already sensed it. Before entering Yaodai Mountain this time, I specifically looked for her but didn't see any trace of her. I didn't expect her luck to be better than mine. Master Taoist Yuan Qing said in a low voice, Master Taoist Xiao, these 7 cultivators are all mid-nascent soul stage. For that Fairy Jing to be able to confront them, her cultivation isn't low. Right now, the two sides are in a deadlock. If Master Taoist wants to help, then we'll immediately take action. Otherwise, we'll head into the formation to look for her. Master Taoist Jingting said with a bitter smile, that Ranjing can only be obtained one at a time. If Fairy Jing obtains it, I'm afraid we'll have to return empty-handed. When Xiao Hua heard this, he faintly smiled and said with deep meaning, That's right. Since we've already arrived late, it's better to wait and see. Although Xiao Hua's plan was well thought out, Fairy Jing's summon immediately shattered his plans. Seeing Master Taoist Jingting whispering to Xiao Hua and the others, Fairy Jing's eyes rippled like water. She said, Master Taoist Jingting, you've also come? Master Taoist Jingting's expression changed. If it was before, he would definitely fly into a rage. After all, Fairy Jing's words, whether intentional or not, had dragged him into the vortex. But fortunately, his anger only swept away for a moment, and he immediately calmed down. Beside him was Taoist Xiao, who was a 5th-grade origin power. Why should he care about the petty thoughts of others? Taoist Jingting was calm and didn't agree. The 7 cultivators surrounding him had a plan in their hearts. Everyone exchanged glances and transmitted a few words. Taoist Shifan and Taoist Chu Feng flew out. Taoist Shifan was still able to cup his hands and salute, but Taoist Chu Feng unexpectedly didn't even need to salute. He opened his mouth and said, Xiao Hua, we've already come here first. The spiritual items here are also things we want. As the proverb says, a gentleman doesn't seize another's good things. I presume that a gentleman like Taoist, who has a graceful bearing, surely won't lower himself to the level of common people like us, right? Hee hee. Xiao Hua laughed. He laughed so hard that his eyes narrowed. He pointed at Fairy Jing and said, the ancients have a saying that good men don't fight with women. You 7 big men actually besieged a female cultivator. Where are the manners of men? Seeing that Xiao Hua didn't attack, Master Taoist Chu sneered in his heart, but he still said, fellow Taoist Xiao is wrong. Didn't you see this demonic beast? Although this woman is a Taoist cultivator, she actually raised demonic beasts and wallowed in evil with the 1,000 demonic Saint Realm demonic beasts. Where is the dignity of a Taoist cultivator? As Taoist cultivators, we naturally have the obligation to help this lost lamb return to the right path. Taoist Yuan Qing and Taoist Jingting were very astonished. The two of them didn't quite understand the meaning of Master Taoist Chu Feng's words, but seeing that Xiao Hua didn't move, the two of them simply ignored him. Master Taoist Chu Feng saw that Xiao Hua and the others were only standing in the air, and he was pleased with himself. Xiao Hua's gaze swept over the formation and he nodded again. Fellow Taoist's words are very reasonable. Since that's the case, I won't disturb you guys from upholding justice for our Taoist sect. Farewell. Yes, fellow Taoist Xiao, please. Master Taoist Chu Feng raised his brows and became even more pleased. He raised his hand and gestured with a somewhat strange tone. Xiao Hua pretended to turn around, but he suddenly opened his mouth again. That's right. I heard that there's a strange treasure of Starlord Hall here. As the proverb says, treasures have no owner and only the virtuous can obtain them. I'll go take a look. I won't disturb you, will I? No, fellow Taoist Xiao, please. Master Taoist Chu Feng laughed until his stomach hurt. Beside him, Master Shifan also resisted the urge to laugh. They really didn't expect Xiao Hua to leave just like that. Of course, it couldn't be said that they didn't think about it, but they didn't dare to believe it. All right. Xiao Hua turned around with a smile, but just as his figure moved, he clapped his hand again. A gust of wind whistled and golden light gushed out from the top of his head. It transformed into a palm that was tens of meters long and grabbed at the air. He even said coldly, Brat, one is a traitor and the other is a strong-willed person. What qualifications do you have to speak to me? Now that everyone is besieging an orphan girl, you actually speak with conviction. If I don't kill you today, when will I? Ah. Master Taoist Chu Feng was really shocked. Although he was on guard before, he gradually let his guard down after seeing Xiao Hua being persuaded. However, he didn't expect Xiao Hua to immediately turn hostile as soon as he turned around. How was this still the pedantic cultivator in his heart? Spiritual Master Shifan was also caught off guard. By the time the two of them hurriedly formed hand seals and 2 rays of light rushed into the air to block Xiao Hua, the large hand had already grabbed down. The space within a radius of several hundred feet was controlled by Xiao Hua. The 2 hand seals rushed out like little loaches. They struggled in the air with all their might and were unable to move. Not only that, but when Xiao Hua's large hand grabbed down, the trident that had previously imprisoned the demonic beast immediately lost its brilliance and fell down. The rabbit-like demonic beast raised its head and cried out loudly. A dense demonic aura immediately gushed out and rushed toward the three people in front of it. At the same time, there were crackling sounds like beans being fried. One by one, jumping runes fell from the demonic beast's body. Seeing this, Fairy Jing was also stunned. However, the joy in her heart far surpassed the shock. After all, Xiaohua was standing in front of Master Taoist Jingting. She didn't dare to climb up to Xiaohua and could only probe Master Taoist Jingting. Unfortunately, Master Taoist Jingting didn't even pay attention to her. Clearly, he was following Xiaohua's lead. She then looked at Xiaohua again. Unexpectedly, he was locked in by Master Taoist Chu's words and wanted to leave after a few words. Fortunately, this Fairy Jing wasn't a scheming person. She didn't play any tricks and only used her own magic power to bitterly support herself. But at this critical moment, there was a sudden turn of events and Xiaohua suddenly attacked. However, the power of Xiaohua's palm was really too fierce. Fairy Jing pointed at the jade pendant above her head. The jade pendant struggled to emit a brilliance, wanting to attack the somewhat difficult opponent. However, the jade pendant in Xiaohua's hand seemed to have sunk into a quagmire. Not only was it difficult to send out magic power, but the jade pendant itself was also difficult to move. This Master Taoist Xiao, what is his cultivation? Fairy Jing glanced at Xiaohua with great fear. Gotcha! Several crisp sounds rang out. Not only did the demonic beast break free from its shackles, but the rings on its front claws also fell off. The three attacking cultivators couldn't help but retreat a few dozen feet from the shock. It was also at this time that a fiery voice came from the array not far below them. Which bastard actually dares to break this old man's forbidden technique? Along with the voice, a black dot appeared at the center of the spell formation. The black dot quickly expanded into a vortex and a cultivator wearing black armor charged out from the vortex. A divine sense comparable to a late-stage nascent soul cultivators angrily swept toward them. Behind the black battle armor, several cultivators activated their own magic treasures and followed after him. Not only that, but several popping sounds rang out as tricolored bubbles also appeared on the other two parts of the formation on the sand island. Two bursts of spiritual sense that were no less powerful than the suit of black armor also swept forth from the spots where the bubbles ruptured. One of the divine senses fell on Xiaohua and paused for a moment. Soon after, a crimson fist flickered with dark flames and smashed towards Xiaohua without any explanation. As the fist moved, the previously angry cultivator waved his hand. Countless amounts of world yuan qi followed his gesture and condensed into a large hand. This large hand had faint black threads floating within it and whistled towards Xiaohua. As for the third nascent soul cultivator, he seemed to be somewhat hesitant. However, as the two large hands fell, he could only point with his finger. A cloud flew out of his hand, and a foot-long horsetail whisk fell from the sky. Ha ha ha. Xiaohua laughed. So it's an old acquaintance. Hua de Zhenren, did you not learn your lesson at the banquet? As Xiaohua spoke, he flew out and activated his Fali. His palm, which was originally a feint, immediately changed. It flipped over like it could overturn mountains and seas, then suddenly expanded. It was like a real giant hand that flashed with golden light as it slammed towards Hua de Zhenren's giant hand. Rumble. Xiaohua's big hand fell down and collided with the other two. The entire sky exploded with a powerful qi wave. The scarlet fist along with the dark flame was completely extinguished by Xiaohua's attack. That blackened big hand was already imprisoned by Xiaohua's magic power halfway. Only a faint black thread spread out like a small snake and retreated with extreme vigilance. There was also the horsetail whisk in the cloud. When the cloud was struck down by Xiaohua, the entire horsetail whisk slightly swayed. Thousands of golden rays of light shattered Xiaohua's little finger. Damn it! The black-armored cultivator angrily cursed, and his expression changed. He slapped his hand, and a foot-long iron spike appeared in his hand. He was going to use his magic power in this fierce wind. You dare! Suddenly, Xiaohua let out an angry roar. The figure that had already landed in front of Taoist Huada suddenly flashed with lightning and retreated like a bolt of lightning. At the same time, He rubbed his hands together and countless tiny lights fell into the void. Bang, bang, bang. Following the collision of the hands of the three nascent soul cultivators, the sound of air breaking rang in everyone's ears. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Another violent sound rang out, and the entire defensive formation shook. However, the center of the shaking was not between the four nascent soul cultivators, but where Xiao Hua just left. -13. Chapter 36:21. Xiao Hua was furious. He hurriedly activated the lightning escape technique and charged toward the center of the explosion at lightning speed. Moreover, countless golden threads flickered in front of him where the lightning had exploded. It was the technique Xiao Hua had activated earlier. However, these golden threads were somewhat disorderly from the impact of the explosion and couldn't fall down for a long time. Only after the most powerful wave of the explosion had subsided did the golden threads disappear. Looking at the sky again, the rabbit-like demonic beast had been blasted hundreds of meters into the air. Its two ears were swaying weakly, and its scarlet eyes flickered with an expression of lingering fear. Fairy Jing, who was on the demonic beast, was also deathly pale. She looked ahead regretfully. As for the four nascent soul cultivators who were attacking Fairy Jing, they had long since flown away. All of them were watching the scene with schadenfreude. In the air, Taoist Chu Feng and Taoist Shi Fan were surrounded by flickering golden threads. Taoist Chu Feng's face was as white as a sheet of paper. Taoist Shi Fan's eyes were filled with innocence. He wanted to open his mouth to explain, but Xiao Hua was furious and couldn't even open his mouth. As for Taoist Yuan Qing, he was standing hundreds of meters away from the two. Half of his Taoist robe was torn, and his face was dark red. His eyes were filled with a look of someone who had just escaped from death. His gaze was still fixed on the place where he had tried his best to escape. There, the unfortunate Taoist Jing Ting had already disappeared. Not to mention a corpse, not even a drop of blood could be seen. No one saw it more clearly than Taoist Yuan Qing. Just as Xiao Hua retracted his hand and fled to attack the three late nascent soul cultivators, Taoist Chu Feng, who had escaped from Xiao Hua's imprisonment, suddenly opened his mouth and spat out a several-inch-long rhombus-shaped object. Taoist Yuan Qing immediately felt fear and trepidation as soon as that object appeared. Immediately afterward, a rumbling sound erupted from Xiao Hua's location. Taoist Yuan Qing immediately moved to attack Taoist Chu Feng, but he was still a bit too slow. Taoist Chu Feng frantically shook his hand and half of his arm turned into blood that rushed into the rhombus-shaped object. The object immediately trembled and disappeared before Taoist Yuan Qing's eyes. How could Taoist Yuan Qing not know how powerful this object was? He hurriedly fled. Taoist Jing Ting's cultivation couldn't compare to Taoist Yuan Qing's, and his scheming was even more difficult to compare. Only after Taoist Yuan Qing fled did Taoist Jing Ting come to his senses. By the time he hurriedly brought out the heaven-shaking hammer, the rhombus-shaped object had already appeared in front of his chest. Bang, bang. The sound of air currents was the sound of the rhombus-shaped object breaking through Taoist Jing Ting's protective qi. Then, the rhombus-shaped object exploded loudly and Taoist Jing Ting's corpse was blown to smithereens. Even though Taoist Yuan Qing reacted quickly, he was still injured by this object. Not only was half of his body unable to move, but the qi and blood in his body were constantly surging and difficult to calm down. What is this thing? Why is it so powerful? It can even kill a mid-nascent soul cultivator? Taoist Yuan Qing thought to himself with lingering fear. I'm afraid. It's a destructive magic weapon specially refined by an expert related to Taoist Chu. While Taoist Yuan Qing was pondering, Xiao Hua's figure had already appeared where Taoist Jing Ting was standing just a moment ago. Xiao Hua merely swept over with his divine sense before he had time to look elsewhere. He heard Taoist Huada sneer behind him. You dare. Then, he saw Taoist Huada clap his hands and a fist-sized fire gourd flew into the air. A ferocious aura that seemed capable of destroying heaven and earth rushed out of the gourd's mouth. Damn it! Xiao Hua cursed, unable to restrain his anger. This matter couldn't be considered as his carelessness. He saw that Fairy Jing was able to confront three nascent soul cultivators by relying on her demonic beast and magic weapon. He only needed to break the confinement spell on the demonic beast. Then, he had Taoist Yuan Qing and Taoist Jing Ting on his side. 3 nascent soul cultivators and 1 demonic beast dealing with 7 nascent soul cultivators shouldn't be a problem. And when he saw the confinement spell on the demonic beast, he knew that there were definitely other powerful nascent soul cultivators within the array. Therefore, he broke the spell and lured them out. But Xiaohua didn't expect Taoist Chu to actually have such a powerful magic weapon. This item was similar to the single-use magic weapon Xiaohua refined when he was still a low-level cultivator. Moreover, this item was 100 times more powerful than Xiaohua's. In particular, the lamentable Taoist Jing Ting was extremely unlucky. Taoist Yuan Qing was able to dodge it, but Taoist Jing Ting actually didn't react at all and was killed. Perhaps Xiaohua would avenge Taoist Yuan Qing's death, but Taoist Jing Ting's death was something Xiaohua must avenge. Xiaohua simply ignored Taoist Huada's sneak attack from behind. His eyes were burning with anger as he stretched out his hand. A large illusory hand grabbed Taoist Chu and Taoist Shifan. These 2 were nascent soul cultivators, but under Xiaohua's fury, they couldn't resist at all. Now, they were like infants in Xiaohua's hands. The 2 revealed fear in their eyes. They did their best to open their mouths as if calling for help from Taoist Huada. But before Taoist Huada's magic weapon could fly out, 2 consecutive sounds rang out. The bodies of the 2 nascent soul cultivators were crushed into meat paste amidst a burst of light. Save me, save me. Following the bloody light, 2 5-foot-long nascent souls clad in armor rushed out from the meat paste. Unfortunately, the 2 nascent souls were still flashing with golden threads at this time. Xiaohua's confinement technique didn't only imprison their bodies, it also sealed their nascent souls. Boom! As soon as the 2 nascent souls came out, they immediately produced a vast chi pillar. Layers of dense fog soared into the sky and wrapped around the nascent souls in Xiaohua's hands. Humph! Xiaohua sneered. He opened his already prepared left hand, and the sword gourd appeared. The thing with a nose and eyes on the gourd rushed out and immediately nailed Taoist Chu's nascent soul. Swoosh swoosh. The spirit-slaying origin light flew out and turned slightly. Taoist Chu's nascent soul's head didn't fall off, but its eyes lost their spirit and the brilliance around its body was immediately extinguished. Save me, save me. Taoist Shifan's nascent soul hurriedly cried out. Taoist Xiao, this junior didn't. Shut up. Xiaohua roared and pointed at the sword gourd. The spirit-slaying origin light from the sword gourd went past Taoist Shifan and rushed towards Taoist Huada. However, a scarlet flame also flew out from Taoist Huada's fire gourd and pierced towards Xiaohua with incomparable speed. Crackle crackle. There was another violent explosion. Hundreds of sparks splashed out from the spirit-slaying origin light and the scarlet flame. Circles of ripples rippled through the air. The group of cultivators who were originally standing behind Taoist Huada were greatly shocked and hurriedly retreated. Humph! Xiaohua snorted coldly. He looked at Taoist Shifan in his hands and said coldly, Taoist Chu is domineering and you actually fan the flames. If he doesn't have the Tao in his heart, how can you have the Tao? Although I didn't have the intention to kill you before, I can't do anything about your repeated provocations. I had no choice but to take action. As for you, losing your physical body is also a punishment. I won't let my hands be stained with blood again. Many thanks, Taoist. Many thanks, Taoist. Taoist Shifan's nascent soul's sharp voice was filled with pleasant surprise. However, when Xiaohua loosened his hand and put away the Qingkuan pouch in his hands, a huge suction force with an overwhelming aura pressed down. Taoist Shifan's nascent soul was simply unable to control his body and fell down along with the mist. Taoist, save me. Taoist Shifan's nascent soul turned pale with fright and hurriedly cried out. Unfortunately, just as his voice sounded, Xiaohua's illusory hand collapsed. Even someone as strong as Xiaohua couldn't resist under the intentional arrangement of Star-Lord Hall. Xiaohua looked indifferently at the place where Taoist Shifan slowly disappeared and shook his head slightly. It's not that I don't want to save you. It's because I'm powerless to save you. With that, Xiao Hua raised his head and looked at Daoist Huode with a gaze like lightning. He smiled and said, "Although I'm powerless to save you, I can send someone to accompany you." Xiao Hua was furious, and he hated Daoist Huode in his heart. He rubbed his hands together, and golden threads entered the void again. Within a radius of 30 meters around Daoist Huode, the strange force suddenly increased, as if several earth-shattering waves were smashing down. Daoist Huode was shocked. He never thought that Xiao Hua would actually have the strength to cast a spell while activating the sword gourd. His heart was in a mess, and the scarlet-red fire threads were already unable to block the soul execution light. Pa, like a sword-piercing bamboo, the fire threads collapsed inch by inch, and the soul execution light followed the fire threads and rushed towards Daoist Huode. "Fellow Shui Ming, help me." Daoist Huode's face changed as he shouted loudly. The cultivator holding the horsetail whisk beside Daoist Huode was helpless. He raised his hand and was about to wave the horsetail whisk. At this time, Xiao Hua's cold voice sounded. "This Xiao is in a bad mood right now. It's best if you don't make a move. Otherwise, this Xiao can't guarantee that this Xiao won't kill all of you." Arrogant. Without waiting for the nascent soul cultivator named Shui Ming to make a move, the black-armored cultivator next to him roared. The small halberd in his hand flew out like a dragon and attacked Xiao Hua. "Fight!" Xiao Hua raised his hand, and the seal of turning the sea rushed out of the space. The coiling dragon roared as it urged the seal to fall down like a mountain. Under the bronze brilliance, a terrifying aura condensed. Under this aura, the black-armored cultivator's small halberd no longer had the appearance of a dragon and was pressed down by more than a few feet. "Go!" When the cultivator Shui Ming saw this, his face changed slightly. He didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly urged the horsetail whisk. But just as the three of them were about to fight, they suddenly heard Fairy Jing cry out involuntarily, "Jing? Fellow Taoist Jing Ting?" Xiao Hua was stunned. He hurriedly scanned with his divine sense and saw a small nascent soul flickering with a faint brilliance at the edge of the formation in the distance. Looking at the nascent soul shaking its head, it seemed to be somewhat unstable. Seeing this scene, Xiao Hua immediately understood. Although Taoist Master Chu's magic treasure had shattered Taoist Jing Ting's physical body, Taoist Jing Ting's luck hadn't declined to the extreme. His nascent soul had actually escaped. It was just that the nascent soul had been knocked unconscious by the huge impact and had just woken up. -13. Chapter 36:22. Xiao Hua was delighted, but he immediately shouted, "Be careful, Taoist Jingting." With that, Xiao Hua ignored the other three late nascent soul stage cultivators and flew towards Taoist Jingting's nascent soul. Moreover, his divine sense displayed the magical power that he had just comprehended from the secret technique of Do Shan Jun's jade pupil. It turned into an invisible big hand that stretched out, wanting to protect Taoist Jingting. Seeing Xiao Hua so easily escape from the battle and treat the three of them as nothing, Taoist Huode couldn't help but bite his lips and his eyes flashed with an ominous glint. Shua. Just as Taoist Huode wanted to make a move, thousands of blood-colored rays of light fell from the top of the defensive formation and quickly covered the four cultivators who had previously besieged Fairy Jing. The four cultivators couldn't struggle at all and immediately disappeared into the rays of light. Forget it. Taoist Huode looked at Xiao Hua's sword gourd floating in the air and the condensed soul slaying origin light. He smiled coldly and looked at the black-armored cultivator. The two nodded slightly and their figures shot into the sky and also disappeared. Alas! The cultivator Shui Ming seemed to want to wait for a while, but the rays of light hit his face and a huge force that even a late nascent soul stage cultivator couldn't resist came. He couldn't help but rush into the rays of light. Looking at Xiao Hua again, he didn't dare to use his magic power to disturb the defensive formation of Star-Lord Hall. He only dared to use the divine ability he had just comprehended and never used. However, he was still too late. Without waiting for the hand formed by his spiritual sense to fall, a thick fog suddenly rose and a pillar of vast qi came crashing down. Taoist Jingting's nascent soul hadn't woken up yet and was sucked into it in a moment. The nascent soul only had time to scream before it disappeared. Boom! The nascent soul had just disappeared, but the thick fog didn't dissipate. The vast chi pillar seemed to have been hit by a huge fist and broke into two with a boom. After the wind whistled, Xiao Hua's figure appeared there with a very angry and regretful expression on his face. Staring at the place where Taoist Master Jing Ting's nascent soul disappeared, Xiao Hua's brows furrowed tightly. He had already seen this kind of strange situation before, but he didn't notice anything strange at all, so it was impossible for him to see anything strange now. If he had never seen Xian Songzi, perhaps he would be like ordinary cultivators and think that Star-Lord Hall was protecting the Taoist cultivators. He would wait until the Yaodai meeting to find Jinren Jingting. However, Xian Songzi's Yuanying and the two Yuanying whose primordial spirits were erased reminded him that the Confucian cultivators would not kill the physical bodies of these three Yuanying cultivators for no reason. If the emperor of a country had such an intention, Star-Lord Hall would have even more. Of course, even if this was really a method used by the Star-Lord Hall to protect their nascent souls, Xiao Hua still had to get to the bottom of it. He had to kill the nascent souls of Reverend Chu and Reverend Shangtian. He absolutely couldn't let them escape. Taoist Master. Just as Xiao Hua was pondering, a timid voice came from not far away. It was Fairy Jing who had collected her demon beast and flew over. Yes. Xiao Hua's gaze swept over Fairy Jing. He nodded slightly with an indifferent expression on his face. Fairy Jing reached into her bosom and took out a jade box. She handed it over respectfully and said in a low voice, "This is the Ranjing I obtained from the Shazhou's formation. Senior must have come for it. I caused Taoist Jingting's death and also received Taoist Master's help. I have nothing to repay you with." Yes, Xiao Hua declined to comment. He beckoned with his hand, and the jade box fell into his hand. Looking at the restrictions and talismans covering the box, Xiao Hua opened his mouth and a beam of sword light fell. All the restrictions were broken. Fairy Jing's heart skipped a beat as she saw this. She secretly rejoiced at her own actions. Contrary to Fairy Jing's expectations, Xiao Hua opened the jade box and saw the so-called Rain Jing inside. An expression of not knowing whether to laugh or cry appeared on his face. He then raised his head and asked, "Li Jing, are you sure this is the Runjing of the heavenly soul, earthly soul, and Renjing? What? Could it be that this isn't a Renjing?" Fairy Jing was also stunned. Looking at the spirit fruit that looked like half a gourd, she asked curiously, "This Renjing is thin at the top and thick at the bottom. Isn't it a nurturing essence? If this isn't a Renjing, then what is it?" Oh? Hearing Fairy Jing's words, Xiao Hua was slightly absent-minded. It seemed that a long time ago, there was a woman called Kai Zhuoxia who said to him, "Taoist Xiao, look, that mother-child spirit fruit is thin at the top and thick at the bottom. Isn't it a nurturing infant? That's why it's called mother-child spirit fruit." Taoist Xiao. At this moment, Taoist Master Yuan Qing transmitted his voice from the distant sky. The defensive formation is about to be sealed by Star-Lord Hall. Taoist Xiao should quickly follow this multicolored light out of the defensive formation. Hearing this, Xiao Hua looked up. Sure enough, there was no one else in the sky except for Taoist Master Yuan Qing. The blood-red multicolored light had already filled the sky and was about to approach Taoist Master Yuan Qing. "Taoist Master Yuan Qing, you go first. I'll be right there." Xiao Hua thoughtfully glanced at Taoist Master Yuan Qing. After thinking for a moment, he transmitted his voice again. Taoist Master Yuan Qing naturally knew that Xiao Hua needed this Renjing, so he didn't delay any longer. His figure flew up and disappeared into the multicolored light. "Taoist Xiao," Fairy Jing said with a smile, "ever since I saw this item in the Sand Province, I've been looking for ancient records. Finally, I found the source. The records in the ancient records are exactly the same as this item. There should be no mistake." "What do you want this item for?" Xiao Hua looked at Fairy Jing with narrowed eyes and asked very abruptly. A trace of sorrow appeared on Fairy Jing's face, but it was instantly washed away by the water-like mist. She said in a low voice, "This is my secret. I hope Taoist Xiao can understand." Xiao Hua nodded and extended his hand. "Give me the jade eye that records how to use this item." This, Fairy Jing was somewhat hesitant, but after a moment of hesitation, she obediently handed over a black cloud eye to Xiao Hua. I want this black cloud eye. Presumably, you've already made a copy of the records inside. Xiao Hua took the black cloud eye and closed the jade box. He threw it to Fairy Jing and said, I have no use for this item. You can keep it for yourself. Fairy Jing was truly overjoyed. She took the jade box with some disbelief. Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, Don't be in a daze. Hurry up and go. If you're stopped by Taoist Master Huada and the others, you can say that I took the Renjing. Many thanks, Taoist Xiao. Fairy Jing was even more delighted. She quickly received the jade box and bowed. Xiao Hua waved his hand and suddenly asked, Right, what's the name of your demonic beast? Fairy Jing was taken aback. She didn't dare to hide anything and hastily replied, Its name is Hua. Oh? Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows. What a fierce name. No wonder its aura is so fierce. Fairy Jing looked at the light above her head and clapped her hand. She took out a jade slip and gave it to Xiao Hua. She said, Taoist Xiao, this is where Junior's cave is located. Junior's strength can't compare to Taoist Zhao's, but I'm in charge of a small country close to the coast. There are often cultivators and Confucian scholars hunting the demons that escape from the 1,000 demons sacred realm. If Senior is interested in demonic beasts, Junior will welcome you. Okay. Xiao Hua smiled and took the jade slip. He waved his sleeve and said, You should go as well. Yes, Fairy Jing didn't know why Xiao Hua didn't leave, but she didn't dare to ask. She flew into the light. After Fairy Jing left, Xiao Hua said, Green-robed Taoist, did you notice something? A voice came from above Xiao Hua's head. It was the formless nascent soul controlled by green-robed Xiao Hua. Let me tell you, fellow Taoist, when I control our nascent souls and leave our bodies, there will be a faint suction force. It's as if a ferocious tiger is watching us from afar. I can sense it. As long as I control my nascent soul to leave your body, the suction force will reveal its teeth at any time. As fellow Taoist already saw, this suction force isn't something you and I can deal with right now. Green-robed Xiao Hua's voice was a bit distant. He seemed to be thinking about something. However, although this suction force is powerful, my nascent soul and my body are protected by the power of heaven and earth. This protection is the fundamental reason why the suction force can't appear. Hiss. Xiao Hua sucked in a breath of cold air. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the increasingly diffusing blood-red light. He said in a low voice, Fellow Taoist, we don't have much time. Do you have any ability to help I rescue Taoist Jingting? No. Green-robed Xiao Hua answered decisively. When I encountered this huge suction force and you and I saw the abnormality, I already started to investigate the secret technique. According to Ai's feeling, and Ai's discussion with fellow Taoist Confucian, I feel that this is a huge defensive formation, but we can't be sure. At the same time, this defensive formation is definitely not something you and I can break with our current cultivation levels. Xiao Hua's eyes flashed with a trace of severity. He said again, So, this is the work of Star-Lord Hall? The problem is, green-robed Xiao Hua sneered, this Jade Pavilion gathering is the work of Star-Lord Hall. It's only logical that there is a defensive formation that can kill nascent soul cultivators. That's right. Xiao Hua touched his chin with his hand and nodded slightly. This is what the secular people say. Zhouyu beats Huanggai. One is willing to beat and the other is willing to suffer. Zhouyu? Huanggai? Green-robed Xiao Hua was stunned. Who is this? Was it written in the books of Confucian cultivators? It's just a ruse of self-injury. There's no gimmick even if it's exposed. Xiao Hua was somewhat impatient. His thoughts turned rapidly. After all, it was his idea to come to the defensive formation in Shazhou. Moreover, when he saw that Ren Jing was a mother-child spirit fruit, he was extremely regretful. If he hadn't taken things for granted and didn't ask more questions, he would have known the truth about Ren Jing before entering the defensive formation. Then, Taoist Jingting might not have had to follow him to this defensive formation and Taoist Jingting might not have fallen. Especially since Taoist Jingting had already pledged allegiance to Xiao Hua and placed his future on Xiao Hua. He even entrusted his safety at the Jade Pavilion gathering to Xiao Hua. Moreover, if it weren't for his grudges with Taoist Chu, Taoist Jingting wouldn't have fallen. All kinds of intricate karma made Xiao Hua feel that he couldn't not save Daoist Jingting's nascent soul. -13. Chapter 36:23. When green-robed Xiao Hua heard this, he laughed coldly and said, "Let them beat you, but don't accidentally kill them." However, at this point, green-robed Xiao Hua's face suddenly showed a shocked expression, and he hastily looked at Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua naturally also thought of what green-robed Xiao Hua was thinking. In a flash, Xiao Hua also cried out, "Not good. This Star Lord Hall is so brazenly intercepting and killing nascent soul cultivators. If it wasn't their usual practice, then they definitely have the intention to kill. The number of cultivators that can survive from Yaodai Mountain definitely won't exceed 10. No, maybe more than 20. It wasn't that Xiao Hua hadn't thought about this before, but now that he thought about it, he immediately understood the essence of the matter, and a chill ran down his spine. That Star-Lord Hall's Hall Master is a cultivator at the peak of the 5th grade of Essence Energy. If he makes a move, you and I won't be his match. Green-robed Xiao Hua said in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist, you have to think of a way. Why did you jump into this pit of fire? There's no need to talk about the bloodstains on the top of your head. They're even more life-threatening means. As long as you fall into them, there's only a slim chance of survival." Xiao Hua looked at the approaching blood-colored light and said indifferently, "I'm afraid you and I will have to risk our lives this time." "That's easy to say," green-robed Xiao Hua sneered. "Even if fellow Taoist wants to risk his life, where will you find Kong Hongwu?" Green-robed Xiao Hua had just finished speaking when he immediately became vigilant again and hastily called out, "Fellow Taoist, don't think of something outrageous. Taoist Master Jingting admittedly did it because of you and me, but at that time was rather tight. Fellow Taoist couldn't have asked about Ranjing's secret in front of a group of cultivators. Moreover, when fellow Taoist fought against Taoist Master Huda, didn't you also release that demonic beast called Hua? Taoist Master Jingting's death can't be blamed on you or me. It's because his luck was really too bad." Green-robed Xiao Hua was exonerating Xiao Hua. What he said was naturally the truth. Nothing in this world was perfect. When regret was born, even if there were thousands of reasons, what use would it be? After the green-robed Xiao Hua gave a few more reasons, he simply shut his mouth and didn't say a word. "Fellow Taoist." Xiao Hua saw that the green-robed Xiao Hua wasn't speaking, so he said, "Not to mention that Master Taoist Jingting died for us. Just this defensive formation, this is Star-Lord Hall's killing intent. If we don't find any flaws in the defensive formation, how can we escape from it? Although you and I have already obtained the Imperial Tutor's lot, do you think that Kong Hongwu will let off the act of killing a Star-Lord? For the sake of our survival, we will also turn this Yaodai banquet upside down." "All right." The green-robed Xiao Hua nodded and said, "As you wish. I also know that what you think is reasonable. But, fellow Taoist, can't you go by yourself? Why did you ask I to go? There's also the scholarly cultivator Xiao Hua, the dragon vein Xiao Hua, and so on." Xiao Hua didn't answer. A moment later, the green-robed Xiao Hua's dispirited voice rang out, "Sigh, I knew it. The first person to eat crabs won't have a good end. I only wore a nascent soul Taoist robe. How did I get into this kind of trouble? Fellow Taoist, if I can't come back, you have to burn paper for I on the 1st and 15th day of the lunar month as a sacrifice to I's soul. Thank you for sacrificing yourself for us, fellow Taoist." Xiao Hua smiled and cupped his hands. "Actually, if something happens to fellow Taoist, I'm afraid that I might not be able to leave this Yaodai Mountain. If I can leave, I will definitely burn paper for you." "Baldy." At this moment, the green-robed Xiao Hua shouted again, "I'm going. If something happens, you have to recite Buddhist scriptures for me. It's best if you use Buddhist magic to summon me back. Even if I can't be free and unfettered on top, I will still go down to accompany Xue Xue. Damn it, go quickly." Xiao Hua's nose was about to become crooked. This was what he was thinking at the bottom of his heart, and all of a sudden, the green-robed Xiao Hua said it out loud. However, the green-robed Xiao Hua clenched his teeth and flew into the air. Although the suction force was much stronger than before, the natural suction force on Xiao Hua's body was even stronger. Moreover, the thick fog and the vast energy pillar were still unable to form. Haha, fellow Taoist, you see, your plan is not appropriate. The green-robed Xiaohua was overjoyed and flew back to the top of Xiaohua's head. I have a good character. Even the heavens are not willing to let I take risks. Change into a Taoist robe. Xiaohua didn't say anything further and let Dragon Vein Xiaohua take out the mountain river seal, taking out the 2 nascent souls he obtained outside of the Yaodai mountain from his dantian. Boom! The vast energy pillar rumbled, and a thick fog suddenly appeared. The suction force was like a trapped beast that instantly rushed in front of him. Send them back to the dantian. Let I choose properly. The green-robed Xiaohua was unexpectedly picky. Okay, but fellow Taoist doesn't have time. If I leave with the blood-colored light and fellow Taoist is received by the Imperial Formation, I'm afraid you will be separated from Taoist Jingting's nascent souls. Xiaohua hurriedly sent the 2 nascent souls back to his dantian. Then, with a wave of his hand, he took out the soaring dragon shears and said, "This is for you to protect yourself." The green-robed Xiaohua urged the nascent souls to return to his lower dantian. Xiaohua's mind also entered with the soaring dragon shears. The green-robed Xiaohua pondered for a moment and found a mid-stage nascent soul shell to enter. The entire nascent soul's body flickered with a faint radiance. In a moment, the originally lightless eyes revealed expression. Then, layers of strange runes emerged from the depths of the nascent soul's body. Following the radiance covering the surface of the nascent soul's body, a series of crackling sounds could be heard. The runes cracked quite a bit, and cracks appeared on the nascent soul's legs and hands. The green-robed Xiaohua said helplessly, "Alas, this Taoist robe doesn't fit. Fellow Taoist, please bear with it." The Jade Archive Xiaohua handed over the soaring dragon shears and urged, "The multicolored light is about to arrive. The soaring dragon shears is a sharp weapon. You should keep it for yourself." The green-robed Xiaohua stretched out his hand. "Give me the ice sea mirror. Oh, also, take a look at Taoist Shifan and Taoist Chu Feng's Chinkuan pouch. See who has the other Kunlun mirror." The Jade Archive Xiaohua frowned slightly and put away the soaring dragon shears. He stretched out his hand, and the ice sea mirror was sent out. Then, he took out the mirror that was very similar to the Kunlun mirror from Taoist Shifan's Chinkuan pouch. The green-robed Xiaohua opened his mouth, and a beam of multicolored light landed on the ice sea mirror. The ice sea mirror followed the multicolored light and flew into the green-robed Xiaohua's mouth. When the multicolored light landed on the mirror trembled twice and didn't fly away. "Demon child, give me a drop of essence blood," the green-robed Xiaohua shouted. Unfortunately, no essence blood appeared in his dantian. "Damn it," the green-robed Xiaohua cursed. The Jade Archive Xiaohua stretched out his hand, and a drop of essence blood fell onto the mirror. When the essence blood merged into the mirror, the green-robed Xiaohua held the mirror with his hand. It was like an ordinary nascent soul holding their own life magic treasure. At this moment, his dantian shook slightly. The Jade Archive Xiaohua knew that the multicolored light had fallen, and he was about to be sucked into the blood-red light. Also, the green-robed Xiaohua was still haggling at this moment. "Give me one of your dual-colored spirit flames. Aren't you unable to use that thing?" The Jade Archive Xiaohua asked curiously. "Of course not in the past. Now that I have been tempered by the 5 Qi righteous thunder and have the secret technique of a Mahayana realm cultivator, of course I can." The green-robed Xiaohua smiled slyly. The Jade Archive Xiaohua was stunned. He didn't expect that under the 5 Qi righteous thunder, his primordial spirit would have an unexpected change. However, he couldn't haggle over anything at this moment. He pointed his finger, and a red and yellow spirit flame appeared in front of the green-robed Xiaohua. The green-robed Xiaohua's face became cautious. He opened his mouth, and the spirit flame slowly fell into his body. The entire nascent soul trembled violently as if it was about to collapse. The Jade Archive Xiaohua raised his hand, but in the end, he put it away. He could help the green-robed Xiaohua inside his body, but if he left his dantian, he still couldn't help him. "Dao, fellow Taoist, quickly send I out." The green-robed Xiaohua opened his mouth and flames rushed out from his mouth and nose. "Okay, The Jade Archive, Xiao Hua hurriedly flew out of his dantian with the green-robed Xiao Hua. At this time, the Imperial Formation was already covered in a blood-red color. Just when Xiao Hua's body was about to touch the multicolored light and disappear, boom, the righteous chi fell, and a thick fog was also born. A huge suction force pulled the green-robed Xiao Hua, and Xiao Hua's body stopped there. What kind of bullshit fire is this? How can it be so powerful? The green-robed Xiao Hua struggled to maintain his nascent soul that was on the verge of collapse. The righteous chi fell and tightly wrapped around the nascent soul, but it also helped the green-robed Xiao Hua. Seeing the thick fog cover the green-robed Xiao Hua saw the green-robed Xiao Hua spit out flames from his mouth onto the mirror in his hand. It seemed like he was going to use the spirit flame to refine it. When he saw this, the green-robed Xiao Hua's body disappeared. When the suction force disappeared, Xiao Hua's body also disappeared in the blood-red multicolored light. The suction force within the blood-red multicolored light was extremely strong. Moreover, when the multicolored light landed around Xiao Hua, it immediately condensed layers of inscriptions. These inscriptions were like blood-red armor that completely covered Xiao Hua. Countless poems and articles flowed within the inscriptions, giving birth to an unspeakable imprisonment. This imprisonment was like thorns that deeply pierced into Xiao Hua's skin. Even though his body was as strong as a demon's body, most of his magic power was still imprisoned, making him unable to struggle at all. What was special was that these inscriptions isolated spiritual sense, Buddhist sense, and soul sense. Xiao Hua could only see the inscriptions unceasingly flowing in front of him. It was as if he was at the bottom of the sea. His entire body was supported by the multicolored light and shot up like an arrow. Although Xiao Hua's spiritual sense and other divine abilities were unable to be used, Xiao Hua was not in a hurry. This was because he could still sense the danger of the green-robed Xiao Hua's pillar of righteous qi. Currently, the green-robed Xiao Hua had already passed through the most dangerous stage. Under the imprisonment of the defensive formation, he was using the uncontrollable spirit flame to refine the ice-deadly mirror. However, the defensive formation seemed to be at the very bottom of the Yaodai Mountain. The green-robed Xiao Hua had been traveling in the thick fog for a long time without any signs of stopping. Suddenly, Xiao Hua frowned. His perception of the green-robed Xiao Hua suddenly began to weaken. Not good. Xiao Hua immediately knew that something was wrong. This was because he had already encountered this kind of perception when he was in the Dawn Rain continent. It was when his phoenix Dharma body fell into the void. However, at that time, his perception was abruptly cut off. -13. Chapter 36:24. Although Xiao Hua knew that the situation was not good, what could he do now that he was here? However, it was also strange. Not long after, the perception became stronger again. Xiao Hua could actually feel the uneasiness of the green-robed Xiao Hua. As Xiao Hua rushed into the sky, the perception became intermittent. When the inscriptions in front of Xiao Hua's eyes gushed out like a fountain, a burst of light and darkness intertwined. The green-robed Xiao Hua was like a kite with a broken string, and there was no news of him. Damn it! Xiao Hua bit his lip and thought to himself, I have to throw a meat bun at a dog for no reason, and I can't come back. I don't know when the Phoenix Dharma body will come back, and this green-robed Xiao Hua is also lost. I hope this defensive formation isn't as heartless as this Xiao thought. Of course, although Xiao Hua couldn't sense the green-robed Xiao Hua's location, it was his primordial spirit after all, so there was a kind of indistinct feeling. He vaguely knew that the green-robed Xiao Hua wasn't in danger at this time. Collecting his thoughts, Xiao Hua raised his eyes and looked around. He saw that this was a blood-red space, or it could be said that it was like a sky filled with sunset clouds. Xiao Hua's surroundings seemed to be misty and boundless, but there was nothing, no matter if it was a mountain peak, clouds, or cultivators. Moreover, although the inscriptions around Xiao Hua's body had already disappeared, his divine sense, Buddhist sense, and soul sense still couldn't leave his body. This caused him to be at a loss. After all, in the previous dangerous situation, if his divine sense or Buddhist sense were restricted, his soul sense could always be used, no matter if it was far or near. This gave Xiao Hua something to rely on in dangerous situations. He had never encountered a defensive formation that even restricted soul sense. However, facing this blood-red sky, Xiaohua always had a kind of vague familiarity in his heart. It was a kind of feeling like he had returned home. Ouch! Xiaohua urged his magic power and flew for a while. Suddenly, he had a kind of realization. This is the void. Good. After Xiaohua understood, he looked around and couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Star-Lord Hall really spent a lot of money. I don't know how much they spent, but they actually set up a defensive formation in the void. Since we are in the void, so what if I don't use my spirit sense? Just as he was thinking, Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat, and he stopped abruptly. He narrowed his eyes and looked into the distance. Green light flashed between his eyebrows, and he was about to use his heavenly eye connection. But at this moment, a breeze suddenly blew by his side, and Xiaohua couldn't help but move to the side. This movement didn't matter, but Xiaohua's body suddenly tightened, as if he was bound by a rope. Xiaohua was greatly alarmed, but before he could urge his magic power to struggle, the force suddenly disappeared again. After flowing light and vibrant colors flashed in front of Xiaohua's eyes, another scene appeared before his eyes. This was a similarly blood-red sky, but this blood-red sky was dotted with brilliant stars. These stars were of different brightness and even moved from time to time. What was special was that in the midst of these thousands of stars, a huge meteor with a tail was especially dazzling. Unfortunately, before Xiaohua could take a few more glances, boom! A strong sound broke through the air from behind Xiaohua's head, and a force more violent than a thunderbolt covered Xiaohua's entire body. Xiaohua raised his eyebrows, and with a shake of his hand, the wishful steel staff appeared in his hand. Without turning his head, he waved it in the direction of the sound, and at the same time, he roared, "Where did this little thief come from? How dare you sneak attack me?" Woo! The wishful steel staff crossed the sky, setting off endless waves of air. The sneak attack hadn't fallen yet, but it had already collided with the waves of air of the wishful steel staff. Pa-pa-pa! The sound of explosions was endless. Bang! The two magic treasures finally collided together, and the sound produced resounded through the sky. Xiaohua stood steadily in midair like a boulder and slowly turned around. The expression on his face was gloomy to the point of being frightening. Looking behind him, a figure was flying swiftly in midair. That figure was unbalanced, and his right hand was still dragging a halberd at an angle. Moreover, near the left side of this figure, two late Yuanying stage cultivators were flying rapidly, flanking Xiaohua from both sides. Similarly, behind these cultivators, there were dozens of early Yuanying stage cultivators surrounding Xiaohua. "All of you, what are you doing?" Xiaohua's roar was like a thunderclap, his eyes flashing with fury. He came to the Jade Pavilion meeting to win the lot of the Imperial Preceptor, and he also wanted to help Jiang country establish a country, so that he could establish a Dao sect and prosper it. However, he had not yet established a country, and he had only taken one step in the journey of 100 miles. Not only did he encounter the obstruction of many Confucian cultivators, but he was also schemed against by the Dao sect cultivators. He was not afraid of the Confucian cultivators. After all, they were enemies, but the Dao sect cultivators frequently plotted against him, which really made Xiaohua's heart cold. Now that he saw dozens of Yuanying stage cultivators not killing the Confucian cultivators, but besieged by others to besiege him, Xiaohua suddenly felt his blood turn cold. He reflected on it a little. He didn't know if his previous thoughts were correct, and he didn't know if everything he planned for the Dao sect was worth it. People, maybe it's better to be selfish. There is a saying that one must first settle the internal affairs. There is indeed some truth. Under Xiaohua's roar, naturally no one would answer. Xiaohua narrowed his eyes, just like that day in the Black Wind Ridge. He only looked indifferently at the group of Yuanying stage cultivators hurriedly setting up the formation, and there was no movement to escape at all. Xiaohua's calmness made Hua Dezhenren, who wanted to urge his magic weapon to stop Xiaohua from escaping, calm down. As for Xiaohua's right, it was the nascent soul cultivator called Xue Ming. He still had the attitude of an expert, and his steps were half a beat slower. However, he still blocked the direction of Xiao Hua's escape. After the formation was completed, Hua de Zhenren slowly flew out and said coldly, "Xiao Hua, you should obediently accept your punishment. Let me ask you, you are a Confucian cultivator. Why did you sneak into my Dao sect cultivators? It's not easy for us to participate in the Jade Pavilion meeting, but you still want to come in and participate. Did you receive a secret order from the Star Lord Hall to kill us Dao sect cultivators?" Xiao Hua's chin was slightly raised as he looked at Hua de Zhenren with a face full of disdain. However, he then looked at the cultivator behind Hua de Zhenren and said, "Old thief Hua de, if you want to commit a crime, why worry about the pretext? What did this Xiao do for you to pin such a huge crime on this Xiao's head? I, Xiao Hua, have said it clearly at your banquet. I, Xiao Hua, have set up a blood monument in the Seven Suns Temple of the Copper Pillar State. I, Xiao Hua, have killed the Copper Pillar State Preceptor, killed the Copper Pillar Prime Minister, and even helped Jiang Country establish a country. I, Xiao Hua, have come here for the Imperial Preceptor's signature. There is no conflict of interest with you. As for what you said about the Confucian cultivator's spy, I, Xiao Hua, find it laughable. I, Xiao Hua, have told you clearly that I, Xiao Hua, seem to have cultivated a Confucian cultivation technique, but this does not mean that I, Xiao Hua, am a Confucian cultivator. Moreover, on the hidden immortal continent, I don't know how many Dao sect cultivators have Confucian cultivation techniques. If you use this to speak, the entire hidden immortal continent's Dao sect, I'm afraid there aren't many real cultivators. What's the use of saying all this? Hua de Zhenren sneered. No one will admit it at this time. Seeing how sincere you are, you must have worked hard in the Copper Pillar State. How about this? You only need to seal your cultivation. When this old man investigates your background, I will return your innocence. With just you? Xiao Hua's face revealed an incomparable sneer. Alas! Immediately after, Xiao Hua looked at the nearby cultivators with indifference, schadenfreude, ridicule, and sympathy on their faces. He sighed and said loudly, "You are all Dao sect cultivators. Your hearts are the same as Xiao Hua's. Xiao Hua knows that you are forced by the situation and have no choice but to submit to power. Now, Xiao Hua will give you all a chance." Speaking up to here, Xiao Hua paused for a moment and said slowly, "Now, if you all leave, this old man will not bicker with you all. If this old man counts to 10 and you all are still here, then don't blame this old man for being ruthless." After waiting for a moment, Xiao Hua opened his mouth and said, 10. Ha! Not only Hua de Zhenren laughed, but the black-armored cultivator next to him also raised his head and laughed. He pointed the long halberd in his hand and said, "Fellow cultivator Hua de, now this old man really believes what you said. This kid is really arrogant. The matter of the Seven Suns Temple, setting up the blood steel, seems to be true. Only such an arrogant person can do such a thing." 9. Xiao Hua ignored him and kept counting with his hands behind his back. "Fellow cultivator Ao is wrong," Hua de Zhenren said with a smile. "His arrogance is deliberately mystifying. He is only a mid-nascent soul cultivator. How dare he set up a blood steel in the country of Confucian cultivators? Any normal Dao sect cultivator can't do such a thing that Confucian cultivators are afraid of. Who would be so reckless as to cause trouble for themselves? Other than trying to cover up and attract our attention and treat him as a real Dao sect cultivator, this old man can't think of any other possibility. Is this guy stalling?" The cultivator surnamed Ao frowned and looked at Hua de Zhenren. Hua de Zhenren pretended to think, looked up and down, and shook his head slightly. This old man doesn't think so. If he is stalling, then he is waiting for the Star-Lord Palace's help. But if the Star-Lord Palace makes a move, he will be useless. 8. Xiao Hua still said. Hua de Zhenren looked up and said, "Shui Mingzi, what do you think?" Shui Mingzi waved his horsetail whisk in the air and said with a smile, "Don't ask this old man. You and Ao Zhantian can decide." 7. Forget it. Ao Zhantian put away the halberd in his hand and said coldly, "This old man was going to make a move. Then, this old man will see what this guy is going to do." Among the fellow Taoists near this old man, how many of them are wavering? 6. this old man thinks so too. Hua Dezhunren also looked to the left. The nascent soul cultivators who met his gaze all lowered their heads, not daring to look him in the eye. These cultivators didn't do that under Xiao Hua's gaze. Clearly, in the face of power, the so-called conscience was worthless. 5, 4, 3, in the air. Only Xiao Hua's voice could be heard. Everyone was waiting there quietly. It was as if they were watching a joke, and also as if they were waiting for the verdict. 2-13. Chapter 36-25. Seeing that the number 1 is about to arrive, an older cultivator's expression slightly changes. He opens his mouth and yells, "Junior is not talented. I came to the Jade Pavilion gathering to look for treasures, not to kill Taoist cultivators. Regardless of whether Xiao Hua is a Taoist cultivator or not, it has nothing to do with Junior." With that, the cultivator hurriedly flies several feet away, trying to break out of the encirclement. "Damn it!" Hua Dezhunren roars, "Xiongyi, you dare to embarrass me?" With that, Hua Dezhunren waves his hand. A fire shuttle of several inches in size falls in the air, turning into a stream of light and stabs at the cultivator. Before the fire shuttle reaches the cultivator, its monstrous ferocious aura has already enveloped the cultivator Xiongyi in a radius of several dozen feet. Xiongyi is shocked. He is only an early nascent soul cultivator. How can he withstand the anger of a late nascent soul cultivator? He also didn't expect that Hua Dezhunren would be so shameless as to kill him in front of everyone. 1. Xiao Hua says coldly. His gaze is like lightning, and his voice is so cold that it can penetrate the bones. "Except for Xiongyi, you from now on are not yourselves." While speaking, Xiao Hua rubs his hands. Rumble, a bolt of lightning as thick as a child's arm appears out of thin air, hitting the fire shuttle of Hua Dezhunren. This time, Xiao Hua is really angry. This bolt of lightning contains a huge force. Just this one bolt of lightning immediately cleaves the entire fire shuttle down from the air, causing several cracks to appear on the surface of the fire shuttle. How is this possible? Hua Dezhunren is shocked. This defensive formation can't use divine sense. How can you use this lightning technique? Xiao Hua doesn't pay attention to Hua Dezhunren and whispers in his heart, "Fellow Taoist, where are you? Hey, why did you call me?" Xiao Hua seems to be unhappy. "This is your Taoist matter. What does it have to do with me?" "Fellow Taoist, nascent soul, I'm afraid it's not easy for me to control it." I understand, but in a moment, you have to help." Xiao Hua understands and doesn't force Xiao Hua. He sends him back to his Dantian and says to Dragon Vein Xiao Hua, "Fellow Taoist, can you control your nascent soul?" "Haha, it's finally I's turn. Let I have a try." Dragon Vein Xiao Hua was overjoyed and rushed into his lower Dantian. He saw that the Yuanying was emitting an intense golden brilliance. The originally nebula-shaped formless body actually transformed into the shape of a dragon. Rumble. As soon as Dragon Vein Xiao Hua rode his nascent soul out of the space, he immediately waved his dragon claw and several bolts of lightning, thicker than buckets, fell down in the shape of a dragon. It was precisely aimed at the 2 early nascent soul stage cultivators. Those 2 cultivators were already prepared for battle and hastily activated their magic treasures. Unfortunately, they only heard 2 blood-curdling screams. 2 magic treasures that had been tempered for who knows how many years were actually split into pieces by the lightning. Oh! Not to mention that Hua Dezhunren and the others were so shocked that their eyeballs were about to fall out. Even Xiao Hua himself was abnormally surprised. His own nascent soul has a thunder core. Although he can't release his divine sense in this defensive formation, he can still control the heavenly thunder. This is his unique ability, but he never thought that Dragon Vein Xiao Hua's lightning controlling technique is actually more powerful than his main bodies. However, Xiao Hua immediately understood. He used a Dao sect spell to activate his nascent soul, or it was due to the instinct of the thunder core. This Dragon Vein Xiao Hua not only used a Dao sect spell, but also because of the national artifact, Mountain River Seal, he can also control the 5 Qi Thunder. Presumably, The power of the 5 Qi thunder in the defensive formation laid down by this Confucian cultivator is even more ferocious than the Tao sect's lightning power. Old thief Huada, give me your life. Xiao Hua was overjoyed. He clapped his hand and the sword gourd rushed out. At the mouth of the sword gourd, something with a nose and eyes appeared. The execution spirit Yuan light sword into the sky and slashed towards Hua de Zhenren. Hua de Zhenren was even more surprised. After all, Xiao Hua's lightning controlling technique is still activated. This lightning controlling technique is facing dozens of nascent soul cultivators. The cultivation of these nascent soul cultivators is not much different from Xiao Hua's cultivation on the surface. Xiao Hua can fight against dozens of nascent soul cultivators. What cultivation is that? Moreover, Xiao Hua still has the strength to use the execution spirit Yuan light while dealing with dozens of nascent soul cultivators. Hua de Zhenren's intestines are already green with regret. However, at this time, it is useless to say more. Hua de Zhenren shouted, "Fellow cultivators, form the formation and attack together." Following Taoist Hua de's order, a group of cultivators that were battered by the heavenly thunder quickly waved their hands and took out their life treasures. They looked at each other and activated their treasures at the same time. Hum, 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 hum. This was an all-out attack from dozens of nascent soul stage cultivators. Although their divine sense was restricted within the defense formation and their nascent soul hand magic arts could not be used, this attack was still far beyond what a mid-nascent soul stage cultivator could withstand. Even a late nascent soul stage cultivator like Hua de Zhenren could avoid the attack temporarily before attacking again. Unfortunately, they are facing Xiao Hua. Look at Xiao Hua. When dozens of nascent soul cultivators are attacking, he is not nervous at all. He doesn't even look at them and only activates the execution spirit Yuan light to attack Hua de Zhenren. Hua de Zhenren knows the power of the execution spirit Yuan light and also knows that he has to hold Xiao Hua back while waiting for the dozens of nascent soul cultivators to attack together. Therefore, the fire gourd in his hand that he has already prepared also flew out. Red flames flashed and first a lotus sprayed above Hua de Zhenren's head, protecting him. The white light released by the sword gourd was immediately stopped by the fire lotus. Then, the fire gourd rushed out a line of fire to meet the execution spirit Yuan light. Although he has made so many preparations, Hua de Zhenren's heart is still uneasy. Almost at the same time, he called out again, "Fellow Taoist Shui Ming, fellow Taoist Zhantian, come help me." Hearing Hua de Zhenren's call, Shui Ming and Ao Zhantian both hesitated. After all, in the previous discussion, Hua de Zhenren was the leader. The two of them are both late nascent soul cultivators. How can they put down their pride and attack a mid-nascent soul cultivator together with Hua de Zhenren? Especially Shui Ming, who originally didn't want to get involved in Hua de Zhenren's matter. However, he was a bit soft-hearted and reluctantly agreed. Now, Taoist Hua de actually ordered 2 people to besiege Xiao Hua, forming a 3-man pincer attack on Xiao Hua. How could they not think about this? However, at this time, the dozens of nascent soul treasures formed a ring of light that flew into the air and sealed Xiao Hua's surroundings. The two of them sighed and looked at each other. Shui Ming raised the horsetail whisk in his hand and thousands of strands of silk flew out and fell on the ring of light like rain towards Xiao Hua. As for Ao Zhantian, he let out a loud roar and the small halberd that was cracked by Xiao Hua transformed into a dragon again. It roared and flew towards Xiao Hua from another direction. The two of them had the intention of watching the show and blindly joining in. However, they didn't expect that such an unintentional action would decide their fate. Pa pa pa. Violent sounds rang out. Under the powerful sealing force, the spirit execution vital light and the flame strands of the fire gourd were suppressed. However, their movements were still not small. The dozens of nascent soul treasures were only a few dozen feet away from Xiao Hua. Even a cultivator of the 5th grade of nascent soul wouldn't be able to survive if struck by these treasures. A sinister smile appeared on Hua Dezhunren's face. He quickly changed the hand seals in his hand, and a streak of flame shot into the fire gourd. The fire gourd's flame dimmed, and the strands of flame retreated. The spirit execution vital light took advantage of the situation and slashed towards Hua Dezhunren. Rumble. At this critical moment, a golden light flashed above Xiao Hua's head. Then, a similar ring of heavenly lightning flashed. A faint five-colored aura was born from the void. Moreover, outside of the heavenly lightning, one could see the traces of a majestic pillar of energy. Ru! Hua Dezhunren involuntarily cried out. Then, a thunderous sound shook the entire space. Rumble! Rumble! Countless waves of energy surged. All kinds of splendor splashed out. All kinds of miserable screams rang out incessantly. Even Xiao Hua's own face was flushed with a red glow. Xiao Hua actually used his bare hands to destroy dozens of nascent soul cultivators' natal magic treasures. Fellow Taoist Long Mai, Xiao Hua couldn't help but groan. You, Xiao Hua said you a few times and didn't dare to say anything else. He hurriedly urged his cultivation technique to stabilize his qi and blood. Fellow Taoist, I'm sorry, I didn't think that I's nascent soul would be so weak. It's not even as good as I's meridian shadow. Long Mai Xiao Hua cried out in embarrassment. Sensing his own nascent soul's dispirited state, Xiao Hua was speechless. How could a cultivator consume magic power like this? Using a nascent soul to deal with dozens of cultivators' magic treasures with bare hands? This was a method to kill 1,000 enemies, but lose 800 of your own men. Let's go back first. Let the nascent soul rest for a while. Xiao Hua couldn't blame Long Mai Xiao Hua. Fortunately, his dantian was nourished by the 5 qi thunder. It wouldn't take too long for his nascent soul to recover. He ordered. Just as he raised his head, he heard Hua Dezhunren excitedly shout. This old man's guess was right. Xiao Hua, your Confucian cultivation has finally revealed itself again. Collect. Following Hua Dezhunren's shout, the previously condensed magic power rushed into the fire gourd. The fire gourd emitted a dazzling brilliance and expanded to several feet in size. Within that brilliance, there was a faint image of a small infant. Then, with a boom, a small hand reached out from the fire gourd. Following the fire thread from before, it fell into the soul execution vital light. The soul execution vital light was instantly extinguished. Furthermore, that small hand followed the extinguished soul execution vital light towards Xiao Hua's sword gourd like lightning. Only now did Hua Dezhunren reveal his malevolence. His goal was Xiao Hua's sword gourd. Oh? Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows. He was a bit surprised. He raised his eyes to look at Shui Mingzi and Ao Zhantian's magic treasures and coldly snorted. Damn it. -13. Chapter 36-26. As soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Hua waved his hand. Buzz. The seal of overturning the sea rushed out of the space and let out a rumbling sound. The jade talismans appeared around the seal. Go. Following Xiao Hua's shout, the seal of overturning the ocean turned into 100 feet in size. It activated layers of illusions and smashed towards Shui Mingzi's horsetail whisk as if it could topple mountains and overturn seas. At the same time, Xiao Hua waved his Taoist robe, and it looked as if it was released from his sleeves. A dark demonic aura rushed out, and the divine power centipede charged towards Shui Mingzi in midair with its fangs bared and claws brandished. As the seal of turning the sea left his hand, Xiao Hua's body flew and raised the wishful staff with both hands. Grow, grow, grow. Following Xiao Hua's angry shout, the staff became 100 feet long and rushed towards Ao Zhantian's dragon halberd. Seeing that Xiao Hua ignored him and only fought the other 2 nascent soul cultivators, Taoist Huade was ecstatic. He had long been drooling over Xiao Hua's soul-slaying light. Otherwise, he would not have attracted so many cultivators to attack Xiao Hua. Seeing that the fire gourd's hand was about to land on the sword gourd, Taoist Huade suddenly had a bad feeling. How could Xiao Hua ignore it? This was too strange. Sure enough, At the same time, Xiao Hua waved the wishful staff. Xiao Hua very strangely turned his head and opened his mouth to chant. Thousands of hammers chiseled deep into the mountains. Just as Xiao Hua chanted the first sentence, Taoist Huada's body was immediately surrounded by a large number of pillars of qi. These pillars of qi were like thousands of hammers and chisels that rushed towards Taoist Huada. Immediately, Taoist Huada's body was covered in golden light. This qi was even more powerful than ordinary magic treasures. How is this possible? Taoist Huada was dumbfounded. He hurriedly used his magic power to block the qi pillars. However, just as his magic power surged, his internal organs were inexplicably attacked. It was as if the qi pillars had also appeared in his body. Raging flames burned like nothing. Xiao Hua immediately chanted the second sentence. Boom! A flame suddenly appeared in Huada Daoist's heart and lungs. The moment this flame appeared, it became a prairie fire that attacked Huada Daoist's internal organs. In the blink of an eye, Huada Daoist's entire body was covered in flames. Taoist Huada's face was filled with shock. He no longer cared about snatching Xiao Hua's sword gourd. He hurriedly activated his cultivation technique. The mana in his body rapidly revolved, wanting to extinguish this heart fire. Unfortunately, no matter how much Hua de Zhenren tried to use his magic power, the flames didn't seem to be extinguished. Instead, they became even more exuberant, causing Hua de Zhenren's heart to burn even more. Even if my bones are crushed and my body crushed, I will remain pure in this world. After Xiao Hua recited the last two sentences, Taoist Huada groaned like a pig being slaughtered. His entire body trembled violently, as if he was about to be killed if he didn't control the fire. Since it was such a critical moment, how could Taoist Huada still dare to hold back? He slapped his forehead with the back of his hand. Puff! A stream of fire energy rushed into the sky. Not only did the fire lotus glow in the fire energy, its roots even rushed into his body along with the fire energy. Fire energy convergence. Haha, old bastard Huada. You have white hair all over your body, yet you call others monsters. This Xiao has never denied that he has the cultivation of a Confucian cultivator, yet you deny it again and again. Hit. Xiao Hua laughed loudly, but the last word was directed at Ao Zhantian. Seeing that the staff was about to strike again, a helpless expression appeared on Ao Zhantian's face. A brilliant light flashed on his arms, and the dragon halberd flew out, roaring as it met Xiao Hua's staff head-on. At the same time, Ao Zhantian narrowed his eyes, and the muscles in his body began to move rapidly. His blood also began to surge, and strands of bloody light flashed on the surface of his body. Crackle. There was a burst of noise. The wishful steel staff had not yet collided with the dragon halberd, but the two murderous weapons began to collide with each other again. Various small vortexes quietly appeared in the nearby dozens of feet, blowing the magic weapons that were damaged by the dragon vein Xiao Hua's thunder into the sky. Although these magic treasures were the natal magic treasures of dozens of nascent soul cultivators, the lightning still flashed on these magic treasures, causing the connection between the nascent soul cultivators and their magic treasures to be intermittent. In a situation where the essence of the cultivators was damaged, it was difficult for them to retrieve their magic treasures in a short time. Boom! The staff finally struck the dragon halberd, and a loud sound rang out in the air again. Everyone couldn't help but feel that it was deafening. Ao Zhantian was feeling extremely dejected. He had always been confident in his divine power, and he had always been known for his powerful physical body. However, he didn't think that he would be so weak in front of Xiao Hua. Ao Zhantian let out a furious roar as the cracks on his halberd deepened, and his body plummeted like a cannonball. His voice was hoarse, and there was a hint of hysteria in it. Even though this roar didn't make much of a difference, the crimson light around Ao Zhantian's body flashed, and the projection of a gigantic crimson dragon gradually emerged from his bloodline. Ao Zhantian actually had the bloodline of a true dragon. Ao Zhantian urged his bloodline to fight with Xiao Hua, but Xiao Hua borrowed the power of the staff to fly up again. His hands formed a seal, and the first shadow of the seal of overturning the sea collided with the golden light of Shui Mingzi's horsetail whisk. At this time, the seal of overturning the sea was different from before. Although Xiaohua didn't deliberately refine it again, the shadow had already solidified. Although Shui Mingzi's horsetail whisk was also refined with an extremely rare material, it was abnormally sharp and could penetrate almost anything. However, when it collided with the shadow of Xiaohua's seal of overturning the sea, it was still smashed by more than 70%. Although the shadow had completely collapsed, Shui Mingzi couldn't help but be shocked. On the hidden immortal continent, when had he ever met a Taoist cultivator who could control a magic treasure to fight with him? Moreover, the Herculean centipede, whose shiny black body was covered with dense and strange golden runes, was even more cunning. Just like when Xiaohua fought with him in the past, it immediately rushed over when he saw a flaw in his fight with the seal of overturning the sea. When he fought with it again, it immediately fled. At this time, Shui Mingzi saw that Xiaohua actually pounced on him in the blink of an eye. The shadow of the second shadow of the seal of overturning the sea was like a huge mountain pressing down on him. Shui Mingzi had no choice but to pour 90% of his magic power into his horsetail whisk. The horsetail whisk emitted a golden light, and thousands of horsetail whisk turned into thousands of sword lights that pierced towards the seal of overturning the sea. Of course, among these thousands of sword lights, he also left some to stab towards the Herculean centipede in the distance that seemed to be attacking him together with Xiaohua. Puff, puff, puff. Although Xiaohua's seal of overturning the sea was powerful, it was, after all, a shadow. Under these thousands of golden sword lights, it was pierced full of holes. Moreover, these sword lights didn't lose their momentum and actually rushed towards the main body of the seal of overturning the sea. Crack, crack. Similarly, when the attack of the seal of overturning the sea was blocked, the Herculean centipede immediately stopped. Its entire body curled up, and its hard carapace pointed outwards. It was like a hedgehog with a mouth full of spikes, making those sword lights unable to pierce through it. Humph! Xiaohua coldly snorted and pointed his hand. Roar! A coiling dragon spun up and urged the seal of overturning the sea to press down heavily. A vast and mighty aura rushed over, and before it could land, it had already completely suppressed the sword lights of the horsetail whisk. Do you think this old man is scared of you? Shui Mingzi similarly sneered. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood essence. He formed a seal with one hand, and several rays of light fell into the blood essence. When the blood essence entered the horsetail whisk, buzz, buzz, a trembling sound resounded. The complete strands of light instantly emitted a red color. They either spun, twisted, or pierced straight. They forcibly pierced through the brilliance and pearls around the seal of overturning the sea and blocked the momentum of the seal of overturning the sea. However, at this moment, Xiaohua once again shocked Shui Mingzi. Xiaohua actually abandoned the seal of overturning the sea at this crucial moment. A whirlwind rolled up around his body, and in the blink of an eye, he once again pounced towards Taoist Huada. In the blink of an eye, Taoist Huada had just used the fire essence to block Xiaohua's Confucian fire attack, and before he could use the fire gourd to collect the sword gourd, Xiaohua suddenly turned into a gust of wind and arrived in front of him. This truly frightened Taoist Huada. Just as he was about to respond, a sharp pain like a sharp awl piercing into his Niwen palace made him unable to help but take a deep breath. Without waiting for him to use a secret technique to resolve the pain, he saw the spirit execution light suddenly split into two. It bypassed his fire strands and slashed towards his neck with lightning speed. Taoist Huada once again turned pale with fright. He hurriedly wanted to use the fire gourd, but because of the pain in his Niwen palace, he was a bit slow. Poof! Taoist Huada had no choice but to open his mouth and turn a mouthful of true fire into a fire wall in front of him. Just as the fire was born, whoosh! Another golden light appeared out of nowhere and flashed towards Taoist Huada's left arm. Taoist Huada only felt a chill in his left arm, and then a sharp pain came. His left arm holding the fire gourd was cut off like rotten wood by a pair of golden scissors. His left arm's defensive treasure armor didn't have any resistance. At the same time, just as the sharp pain came out, Xiaohua's right hand waved his Taoist robe. His action was even more natural than moving clouds and flowing water. In an instant, Taoist Huade could no longer sense the location of his fire gourd. This is this old man's life source magic treasure. Taoist Huade was simply going crazy. He schemed against Xiao Hua's sword gourd, but he didn't think that Xiao Hua was also scheming against his fire gourd. He hadn't even touched the sword gourd's hair, but Xiao Hua's series of attacks had already caused him to lose the rice used to steal the chicken. Poof! Looking at Xiao Hua again, he simply took advantage of Taoist Huade and didn't wait for Taoist Huade to come to his senses. He opened his mouth and several sword lights pierced towards Taoist Huade's heart. Suddenly, an indescribable palpitation appeared in Taoist Huade's heart. Taoist Huade couldn't help but exclaim, but just as he exclaimed, another sharp awl pierced into his Niwen palace. How was this a fight? It was simply a one-sided slaughter. Taoist Huade couldn't imagine that Xiao Hua's Taoist cultivation realm was lower than his, but his strength was actually far beyond his own. Moreover, Xiao Hua's Confucian cultivation strength was even higher than his. At this time, Xiao Hua wasn't fighting alone, but a Taoist cultivator, a Confucian cultivator, was fighting. -13. Chapter 36-27. Only now did Hua Dezhenren realize that Xiao Hua was a nascent soul intermediate stage cultivator, but he had the strength of a nascent soul intermediate stage cultivator. How could he be his opponent? Moreover, seeing Xiao Hua use the spirit-exterminating vital light, the flying sword, and the unfathomable soul stab technique, it was obvious that he wanted to take his life. Thinking of this, how could Hua Dezhenren stay any longer? He clapped his hands, and an ordinary-looking jade pendant appeared in his hand. With a piyub sound, a breath of true qi landed on it. Layers of inscriptions surged out from the jade pendant and enveloped Hua Dezhenren in an instant. Boom! Following a majestic pillar of true qi, Hua Dezhenren actually disappeared. Motherfucker! Xiao Hua was a little depressed. He understood that this was the escape technique that Hua Dezhenren had obtained from the Star-Lord Palace. He could only watch helplessly as Hua Dezhenren escaped from the Star-Lord Palace. Xiao Hua hesitated for a moment, wondering if he should use his illusion breaker eye. At this time, he heard a wong-wong sound of air friction. Ayo! Then there was the sound of a dragon's roar. Xiao Hua stowed away his sword gourd and soaring dragon shears before turning around with a cold expression. A crimson dragon that was close to 1,000 feet in length appeared above Ao Zhantian's head. It opened its sinister maw and pounced toward Xiao Hua. An aura comparable to that of the soul separation stage, and an aura that made all the cultivators tremble uncontrollably surged through the air. Oh, a true bloodline? This was the first true bloodline Dharma body that Xiao Hua had seen on the hidden immortal continent. Xiao Hua's eyes flashed with a strange light. It's a pity that my Phoenix Dharma body is not here. Otherwise, I'll let it fight with you. Xiao Hua snorted coldly. Golden light flashed around his body, and the Heavenly Laws embodiment technique was activated as well. His Transcendence golden body also appeared. In just a moment, a Transcendence golden body that was close to 1,000 feet tall stood in midair like a demon god. Not only were the nascent soul cultivators dumbfounded, even Shui Mingzi was dumbfounded. It wasn't that they hadn't seen such an awe-inspiring Dharma body before, but this was a defensive formation with divine sense shackled. Dao sect's divine powers were suppressed. Not to mention the Dharma body, even activating Dharma treasures would be somewhat strenuous. How could Xiao Hua possibly bring out his Dharma body? Ao Zhantian's bloodline could be attributed to his true bloodline, but Xiao Hua, who had ever seen such a golden bloodline? Eat this Zhao's staff. Xiao Hua roared and waved the wishful steel staff in his hand. At first, the wishful steel staff was still a few dozen feet in size, but when it hit the top of the blood dragon's head, it was already a few hundred feet in size and a few dozen feet in thickness. Woo! The wishful staff fell with a gust of wind. The blood dragon's eyes were crimson red, and an old voice spoke with Ao Zhantian's tone. This old man has never seen a magic treasure that can injure a bloodline Dharma body. Stop dreaming. Today, I'll show you how powerful this old man is. Let this old man have a taste of your flesh and blood. Ha ha ha. This voice reverberated throughout the entire space. The blood dragon opened its mouth, and the blood dragon's breath turned into a giant pillar. The blood dragon also pounced over, obviously wanting to dive into Xiao Hua's body and devour his flesh and blood. Xiao Hua's eyes flashed, and he tilted his head slightly. He pointed his finger, not at the blood dragon, but at the seal of overturning the sea above Shui Mingzi's head. The seal of overturning the sea expanded again, and it was a full 500 feet in size. Shui Mingzi had no choice but to use his magic power to block it with his horsetail whisk. As for the divine power centipede, it seemed to understand Xiao Hua's intention. Suddenly, its entire body expanded, and the two antennae in front of its head trembled rapidly, cutting towards Shui Mingzi's back. Ao? Seeing that Xiao Hua was still distracted, the blood dragon couldn't help but roar, and its speed increased again. However, Xiao Hua didn't seem to panic. He calmly waved the wishful steel staff, and it landed on the blood dragon's breath. Pooh! It was abnormally dull, but the dull sound seemed to have knocked on Ao Zhantian's heart. The almost invisible blood dragon's breath was smashed into pieces by the wishful steel staff. That wasn't all. Ao Zhantian was still stunned by what happened next. The blood dragon's breath disappeared with the wishful steel staff, and the wishful steel staff didn't stop for too long. It passed through space and landed on the blood dragon's head with a loud bang. Ao Zhantian's arrogance was finally broken today. The blood shadow Dharma body, which he thought was impossible to injure, was like an ordinary demonic beast under the wishful steel staff. Boom! A loud sound rang out, and Ao Zhantian felt as if a mountain was pressing down on him. It was more direct than being hit by any magic treasure or spell. Pooh! Ao Zhantian spat out a mouthful of blood essence, and his entire body was oozing with blood. Moreover, an indescribable blush immediately spread all over his face. Roar! The blood dragon's blood-curdling screams resounded throughout the entire defensive formation. The blood dragon's body started to collapse from its head down to its tail. Ao Zhantian's eyes flashed with desperation, and he stubbornly patted his head. A blood-red nascent soul appeared in mid-air. This nascent soul was wearing a treasured armor, and the dragon-shaped totem on the armor was slowly disappearing. The nascent soul held a dragon halberd in its hand that flashed with a dazzling brilliance. However, as soon as the nascent soul appeared, it was immediately shocked. Its two eyes looked left and right cautiously. At this time, it saw two beams of spirit-punishing vital light fall from the sky. They were about 100 feet away from the nascent soul, but they didn't shoot out. Yu. Ao Zhantian naturally didn't care too much about the spirit-punishing vital light, but under the fierce flames of the spirit-punishing vital light, a faint sense of desolation arose in his heart. The nascent soul opened its small mouth and whispered a few words. Xiao Hua had intended to kill to establish his might. However, when he saw Ao Zhantian's nascent soul appear, he immediately remembered that this was the defensive formation of the Star-Lord Palace. Although he would be happy to kill Ao Zhantian's nascent soul would fall into the defensive formation. Wasn't he helping the Star-Lord Palace? Thus, he controlled the spirit-punishing vital light to stop above Ao Zhantian's head and said coldly, Ao Zhantian, do you want to live or die? So what if I want to live or die? The blood shadow Dharma body above Ao Zhantian's head could no longer take shape. It slowly turned into a bubble and fell into his body. Ao Zhantian looked at Shui Mingzi in the distance. He was actually blocked by Xiao Hua's demonic pet, and Xiao Hua's overturning sea seal was able to block Shui Mingzi's horsetail whisk. Xiao Hua said indifferently, if I want to die, I'll kill you right now. In order to not leave a nascent soul for the Star-Lord Palace, I'll kill your nascent soul as well. You. Ao Zhantian wanted to retort when he heard Xiao Hua's nonchalant tone. However, he knew that Xiao Hua had scared off spiritual Master Huade when the three of them attacked him. Now that he was facing Xiao Hua alone, how could he survive? What if I want to live? Ao Zhantian was abnormally embarrassed, but he still asked. Swear a blood oath and serve me for 1,000 years. Xiao Hua replied without hesitation. For 1,000 years, not only will I provide you with all your cultivation needs, I can also help you reach The 5th grade of origin power? No. Impossible. Ao Zhantian also shouted without hesitation. Xiaohua also didn't hesitate. He pointed at the spirit punishing vital light and said, "Fine. Since you don't want to live, then die. Spiritual Master Xiao, you've misunderstood. Spiritual Master Xiao." Ao Zhantian hurriedly withdrew his nascent soul and shouted, "What I meant was, what kind of good conditions do you have?" Oh. Xiaohua was slightly stunned. He stopped the spirit punishing vital light and said indifferently, "What's impossible? At this point, do you still have a choice?" Then, Xiaohua turned his head and looked at the dozens of nascent soul cultivators. His huge body was like a demonic god as he shouted, "And you all, swear a blood oath immediately and serve me for 1,000 years. Otherwise, I'll kill you on the spot." Ah! All the nascent soul cultivators were dumbfounded. They looked at each other, not knowing what Xiaohua wanted to do. Ao Zhantian. Xiaohua didn't care about these small fries. He looked at Ao Zhantian and said, "You'll be the first." Then, Xiaohua raised his eyebrows and swung the wishful staff in Shui Mingzi's direction with a boom. Shui Mingzi was scared into flying far away. His horsetail whisk was powerful, but against the wishful staff, it didn't have any advantage at all. He was scared away, but the seal of ocean overturning seal and the Herculean centipede still caught up to him, not giving him any chance to escape. Ao Zhantian's mouth was bitter. He was a late nascent soul cultivator, but he was forced to swear a blood oath. This was something he had never thought would happen ever since he entered the nascent soul realm. "Kill." Ao Zhantian hesitated. Xiaohua shouted, scaring Ao Zhantian. He hurriedly shouted, "I, Ao Zhantian, swear to heaven and earth that I am willing to serve Spiritual Master Xiaohua, Spiritual Master Xiao, for 1,000 years. I don't dare to have any thoughts of rebellion, Kacha." Just as Ao Zhantian was about to make his vow, a streak of golden light shot into the sky and landed in the distance. A nascent soul cultivator who was about to flee was immediately sliced off by the soaring dragon shears. Motherfucker! Ao Zhantian finally understood. So Xiaohua wasn't talking to him. Kacha! A muffled sound rang out as a bolt of lightning struck down from above Ao Zhantian's head. A blood-red mark appeared between Ao Zhantian's eyebrows. The mark followed the bolt of lightning into the air and transformed into a thumb-sized rune. The rune was about to fly toward the bolt of lightning. However, Xiaohua's eyes rolled up as a green light flashed between his eyebrows. He let out a soft sigh that sounded like the sigh of a demon god. Boom! The same bolt of lightning shot out. The rune actually changed direction and fell into the bolt of lightning. Then, it disappeared between Xiaohua's eyebrows. This. Xiaohua's divine ability was truly inconceivable. Ao Zhantian couldn't help but sigh. His originally sullen heart suddenly felt better. He had always been competitive, and not only had he offended Confucian cultivators, he had also offended many Taoist cultivators. Now that he had found a powerful backer, it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. And you all... Xiaohua's voice was even more majestic than the usual lightning bolt. The dumbfounded nascent soul cultivators immediately came to their senses. It was time for them to make a choice. -13. Chapter 36:28. Of course, the nascent soul cultivators found this difficult to accept. However, when they saw the arrogant Ao Zhantian lower his head in disbelief, they then looked at the nascent soul cultivator who had just lost half of his shoulder and was now as pale as a sheet of paper, and finally at Shui Mingzi, who was trying to escape but was being held back by his demonic pet and magic treasure. How could they not have made the right choice? The dozens of nascent soul early and mid-stage cultivators all swore blood oaths, which were all taken away by Xiaohua without exception. Then, Xiaohua withdrew his heavenly laws embodiment technique and pointed with his finger. Go, surround Shui Mingzi. Yes, the dozens of nascent soul cultivators couldn't even muster the will to resist. They responded in unison and surrounded Shui Mingzi. Only Ao Zhantian and the early-stage nascent soul cultivator named Xiong Yi were left in front of Xiaohua. Seeing such a scene, Xiong Yi was at a loss of what to do. He didn't know whether to leave or stay. His eyes slightly turned as he looked at Xiaohua. Xiongyi, you can leave now, Xiaohua ordered. Yes, thank you, senior. Xiongyi came to his senses and hesitated. He bowed and flew into the distance. Ao Zhantian said indifferently, Daoist Xiao, although I swore a blood oath to follow your orders, if you don't respect me, I would rather self-detonate then. Can you still self-detonate now? Xiaohua replied even more indifferently than Ao Zhantian. Ao Zhantian's expression changed greatly. However, Xiaohua quickly added, of course, fellow Taoist, don't worry. I am not like that old bastard Huada. You will know my character in the future. All right. What else could Ao Zhantian say at this point? He looked at Shui Mingzi, who was surrounded by the nascent soul cultivators, and said in a low voice, this Shui Mingzi has some background. If you can subdue him, it will be of great benefit to you. Oh? Xiaohua raised his eyebrows and nodded. Brother Ao, don't worry. In the Yaodai Mountain, he will either fall into the hands of the Star Lord Palace or me. I believe he will make his own decision. All right, I'll accompany you, Ao Zhantian said in a low voice. He was naturally unwilling to let Shui Mingzi escape after falling into Xiaohua's hands. By the time Xiaohua and Ao Zhantian arrived at the scene, Shui Mingzi had already put away his horsetail whisk and was hovering in midair. The seal of overturning the sea had already enveloped him from afar, and the divine power centipede had already activated its demonic chi to fly close to him. Shui Mingzi. Ao Zhantian looked at the helpless expression on Shui Mingzi's face and said, this old man won't say anything else. Previously, we all fell into that old bastard Huada's trap. Now that we have offended Daoist Xiao is quite magnanimous. He doesn't want our lives, but he wants us to serve him for 1,000 years. I know. Without waiting for Ao Zhantian to finish, Shui Mingzi waved his sleeves and said, since I've made my choice, I won't regret it. However, this old man doesn't quite believe what Daoist Xiao said just now. Yes. Without waiting for Ao Zhantian to speak, Xiaohua waved his hand and threw a jade box to Shui Mingzi. He said proudly, take a look at this first. This is... Shui Mingzi was a little stunned. He picked up the jade box with a strange expression. When he opened the jade box, he saw a golden light flashing inside. It was a 10,000-year-old human essence. He was stunned for a long while before he came back to his senses. He hurriedly closed the jade box and said, I'm willing to serve Daoist Xiaohua for 1,000 years. All right. Xiaohua accepted Shui Mingzi's blood oath. Seeing that Shui Mingzi was about to return the jade box to him, he said with a smile, I'll bestow this item to you. No, no way. Shui Mingzi's mouth fell open. He couldn't believe his ears. Daoist Xiao, this item. I told you to take it, so take it. Xiaohua was displeased. He took out another jade box and threw it to Ao Zhantian. I just happened to get some. Take it as a greeting gift. Ao Zhantian had been curious for a long time. He took the jade box and hurriedly opened it to take a look. His eyes flashed with astonishment. He didn't stand on ceremony and hurriedly accepted the jade box. He bowed and said, Daoist Zhao's fortune is truly beyond our reach. We've searched several spell formations, but we couldn't find any useful ones. I didn't expect Daoist Xiao to obtain such a bountiful harvest in such a short period of time. I thank Daoist Xiao for his generous gift. You're welcome. Xiaohua waved his hand. I don't have many of these items. You've all gotten a bargain. Thank you, Daoist Xiao. Seeing that Ao Zhantian accepted the jade box, Shui Mingzi hurriedly hid it away. You all have your own rewards. Xiaohua looked at the curious nascent soul cultivators and said with an indifferent expression, however, I can only bestow them to you after the Jadestige meeting. Thank you, senior. Why did a group of nascent soul cultivators come to Jadestige Mountain? Wasn't it to obtain some rewards? Since Xiaohua had a treasure that even nascent soul late-stage cultivators liked, what was 1,000 years of service to him? Xiaohua kept the seal of overturning the sea. The Herculean centipede bared its fangs and brandished its claws beside Xiaohua, as if it was showing off. When Xiaohua opened his Taoist robe, it obediently flew back into it. Daoist Xiao, your demonic pet is truly powerful. If you refine it for another 100 years, I'm afraid it'll be able to compete with an upper 4th grade essence force cultivator. Shui Mingzi couldn't help but exclaim. Xiaohua smiled and replied, how would I have the time to refine it? Let it cultivate by itself? Shui Mingzi opened his mouth as if to say something, but he stopped himself. Daoist Xiao, what should we do now? Ao Zhantian said with a bitter expression. I can't help Daoist Xiao with my injuries on Jadestige Mountain. There's no need for you to help. Xiao Hua's body flashed with golden light again, and the mountain river seal flew out. He said, come in and rest. I'll let you out once we leave Jadestige Mountain. This, Ao Zhantian wasn't like Su Tingzi. He frowned and said, if I enter the nation weapon, won't my life follow Daoist Xiao? If Daoist Xiao dies on Jadestige Mountain, won't I also be doomed? If you don't go in, can you walk out of Jadestige Mountain alive? Xiao Hua replied. Moreover, do you think you can live longer than me? Shui Mingzi was also hesitant. He asked, Daoist Xiao, this nation weapon is used by Confucian cultivators to suppress our Daoist sections. Although we don't mind going in, can it suppress dozens of us at the same time? It's only 30 or so, no problem. Xiao Hua said confidently. This junior is willing to go in. The injured nascent soul cultivator hurriedly said, as if he wanted to redeem himself by doing good deeds, but also as if he was really afraid of dying inside the formation. Xiao Hua waved his hand, and a stream of dragon chi rushed out, immediately sucking him in. Of course, at the same time, Xiao Hua pointed his hand and landed on the top of his head. When he lost consciousness, he used his mind to send him into the space. Although there was a first, the others were still hesitant. After all, this was different from swearing a blood oath and being controlled for 1,000 years. This was putting their lives in the hands of others. However, just as they were hesitating, a thunderous boom came from the distant horizon. Everyone looked up and saw the blood-red sky in the distance collapsing one after another. Between the collapses, there were thousands of flashes of lightning. After the blood-red sky collapsed, it turned into a blood-red stream that swept toward everyone. Damn Star-Lord Hall! Xiao Hua saw this, and how could he not know what the Star-Lord Hall was planning? This was not much different from the Star-Lord Defense Formation on the Yaodai Mountain. They both wanted to kill most of the Daoist cultivators, leaving only those who had the means to escape death. Xiao Hua swept his gaze and said coldly, this old man doesn't have time to waste with you. The formation has already begun to close, so this old man is going to find a way out. Senior, please wait a moment. This junior is willing to go in. A group of panicked cultivators hurriedly called out. They knew in their hearts that it was better to let Xiao Hua lead them alone rather than having so many people search in a mess. Xiao Hua's abilities were unpredictable, and his chances of survival were much higher than theirs. Come in. Xiao Hua sucked that person into the space again. This time, the others were finally moved, and in a short while, 35 nascent soul cultivators were sucked into the space. This one will go in as well. Ao Zhantian narrowed his eyes and looked at the torrential flood in the distance. His eyes were filled with helplessness, and he looked at Shui Mingzi. How could Shui Mingzi let Xiao Hua suspect him? Naturally, he tactfully said, no problem. This old man is afraid that this old man is powerless to escape from this collapsed formation, so I can only accompany fellow Daoist Ao. I'll have to trouble Daoist Xiao for everything. Please. Xiao Hua was overjoyed when he saw the two late nascent soul cultivators enter the trap. As he spoke, 2 streams of dragon chi swept the two into the space. After entering Xiao Hua's space, not to mention nascent soul cultivators, even spirit-severing cultivators were nothing but food for him. After sucking in dozens of nascent soul cultivators, Xiao Hua didn't have time to raise his head to the sky and laugh. His figure immediately floated up and flew in the opposite direction of the collapsed formation. It was as if the entire space had collapsed. Xiao Hua had only flown for a short while when intense thunderclaps flashed in all directions. All kinds of bloody light flourished, and the aura of destruction became increasingly powerful. Senior, save me. In front of Xiao Hua's right hand, the cultivator named Xiong Yi was in an extremely sorry state. His Taoist robe was askew, and his hair was also disheveled. A small flying shuttle flickered under his feet as he rushed toward Xiaohua. Looking behind Xiong Yi, the bloody red torrential flood created a wave of over 10 meters tall, covering the sky and covering the earth as it chased after him. Xiaohua frowned, and a whirlwind appeared under his feet. His figure turned into a gust of wind as he swept in front of Xiong Yi. With a wave of his hand, a golden light swept up Xiong Yi, and then he soared into the sky again. Just as Xiaohua flew away, boom! In the place where Xiong Yi had just flown past, the space around him shattered. Lightning flashed and turned into a clear torrential flood. Xiaohua still couldn't release his divine sense, but he had a feeling that this clear torrential flood was definitely not ordinary. He definitely couldn't touch even half a drop of it. Many thanks, Senior. After being rescued by Xiaohua, Xiong Yi felt like he was flying forward like lightning. He had temporarily escaped his predicament and hurriedly expressed his thanks. -13. Chapter 36:29. Hearing this, Xiaohua withdrew his gaze and replied indifferently, "You're welcome." After he finished speaking, his heart skipped a beat and he asked, "Are there any other cultivators ahead?" "No," Xiong Yi answered honestly. "I've been flying for a long time and haven't seen any cultivators." "Oh?" Hearing this, Xiaohua thought for a moment and asked, How did you follow Hua de Jinren?" Hearing Xiaohua ask about the ambush, Xiong Yi didn't dare to hide anything and hurriedly told him the whole story. As Xiaohua expected, Hua de Jinren had the same plan as Xiaohua. In addition to obtaining treasures in the Jade Pavilion Conference, he also wanted to win over a group of nascent soul cultivators. Therefore, long before the blood-red star streaked across the sky, there were already a dozen nascent soul cultivators gathered in the defensive formation of the Jade Mountain. Including Ao Zhantian and Shui Mingzi, there were already more than 30 cultivators in the defensive formation of the Sand Island. Taoist Hua seemed to have heard of the famous mother-child spirit fruit in the Sand Continent, so he was able to find it before Xiaohua. Unfortunately, Fairy Jing beat him to it, so Taoist Hua and the others were left empty-handed. Just as Ao Zhantian had said, they had searched for a long time, but to no avail. When the ominous star appeared, dozens of cultivators were sucked into the blood-red light. When they reappeared, they found that apart from a few people who disappeared, most of them were still together. Therefore, Hua de Jinren immediately discussed with Ao Zhantian and Shui Mingzi to besiege Xiaohua. Xiong Yi didn't know what the three of them discussed. Xiong Yi wanted to leave early, but he didn't dare to because of Hua de Jinren's fierce reputation. In the end, Xiaohua defeated these cultivators in one fell swoop. "So, you didn't see Fairy Jing and Taoist Yuanqing?" Xiaohua asked. Xiong Yi nodded. "Yes, the female cultivator who got the Ranjing and the male cultivator who was with you didn't appear here. So, this is only a point of the defensive formation. It's not the whole formation." Xiaohua instantly thought of the space he appeared in before. There were no cultivators inside. Xiong Yi hurriedly shouted, Yes, that's right. I thought about it for a long time. This must be the only place that collapsed. As long as we find the way out, we can escape." I understand. If that's the case, I have a 60% chance of escaping." Xiaohua's eyes narrowed as he looked into the distance and nodded. "However, it's very inconvenient for this old man to bring you along. Senior, Junior is willing to work for Senior." Xiong Yi was used to Hua de Jinren's face. Xiaohua's little tail had just been exposed, and he immediately agreed. That. In the end, Xiaohua was not as thick-skinned as Taoist Hua. He said somewhat embarrassedly, "Xiong Yi, you misunderstood. What I mean is, Senior, you misunderstood as well." Xiong Yi said with a smile, "In fact, I came to the Yaodai meeting on one hand to get the rare treasure. On the other hand, I hope to find some useful people. After all, on the hidden immortal continent, there are very few Confucian cultivators that we can trust. It's best to find a Taoist cultivator to help us. As for the third objective, if I can meet an expert like Senior, I don't mind submitting to you. To tell you the truth, I met a fellow cultivator in the late stage of the nascent soul stage in the early stages of the Jade Pavilion meeting. I chatted with him for a while. Although I didn't agree at that time, I already had a plan in mind." "Grand Mist Ancestor?" Xiaohua asked in a low voice after pondering for a while. Xiongyi was startled, and then his expression changed slightly. He said somewhat unnaturally, "Could it be that Senior is also? Grand Mist Ancestor is Grand Mist Ancestor. I am Xiao." Xiaohua said indifferently, "I won't force fellow cultivator Xiong." No, no. Xiongyi breathed a sigh of relief. At this time, how could he have any other choice? He hurriedly said with a smile, "I once established a country, but later the country's monarch was bewitched by the Buddhist sect. I was disheartened and no longer paid attention to it. Now that I am free, I can serve Senior." Good. Xiaohua nodded. "Close your eyes. I will suppress you into the mountain river seal. After we leave the Yaodai mountain, you can follow me." This, Xiongyi naturally hesitated, but after a moment, he closed his eyes and said, "I'll have to trouble Senior." Xiaohua didn't say anything and immediately put him back into the mountain and river seal. Then, he looked around. This place was similar to the void, so he had an inexplicable feeling of familiarity in his heart. After a short while, he found something strange. However, this strange thing seemed to be mobile. Before Xiaohua could fly over, it immediately disappeared. It was exactly the same as when Xiaohua mysteriously appeared in Huada's encirclement. Whoosh! All of a sudden, around Xiaohua, several clear streams of blood red rushed out like a waterfall. Although those streams of water weren't large, wherever they went, the entire space collapsed. The streams rushed out in a strange way, and Xiaohua was caught unprepared. His figure flashed and dodged, but several drops of blood still splashed on his Taoist robe. Xiaohua did not care. This kind of clear stream was powerful, but under his protective golden light, how could a few drops of clear stream pose a threat to him? However, when those several drops of clear water fell, a sizzling sound rang out. The golden light protecting Xiaohua's body was actually annihilated in an instant, revealing an enormous flaw. The clear water actually seeped into the surface of Xiaohua's body. Ouch! Xiaohua was shocked that such a situation would occur due to his carelessness. Xiaohua's Taoist robe was also torn in an instant, and a heart-wrenching pain came from the clear stream. Xiaohua's abnormally strong body was actually invaded by this clear stream. Pooh! Xiaohua hurriedly opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of thick true energy. It landed on the corroded part of his body, and he barely managed to grab the few drops of clear stream. When Xiaohua opened his transcendence vision, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He saw that within these drops of blood-red liquid, there were strands of dark red lines. Between the lines of lines, there were many small dots that contained great power. Xiaohua was familiar with these small dots of light. It was the power of starlight. As for the dark red lines, Xiaohua had seen them before. They were actually poison mixed with the power of the netherworld. Damn it! Xiaohua cursed angrily. The Confucian cultivator's arrangement was truly ruthless. Even his body, which had been tempered for many years, was unable to withstand it, let alone an ordinary cultivator. Even Ao Zhantian wouldn't be able to escape easily when he encountered the clear stream of clear stream. Of course, Xiaohua was only lamenting. This wasn't the first time he had encountered the Confucian cultivator's ruthlessness. His current plan was to escape from this place. There wasn't much time left for Xiaohua, and the space he could escape was also limited. The confidence he had before had leaked out too much, and an indescribable sense of fear emerged from the bottom of his heart. What seemed like an ordinary escape had developed into a test of life and death. Xiaohua smiled bitterly. At the crucial moment, he opened his transcendence vision. However, all he saw with his transcendence vision was blood red. His vision was filled with resplendent starlight, and it was even inferior to the naked eye. How could he see the exit that could appear at any time? Helpless, Xiaohua could only close his transcendence vision again. He could see with his naked eye and fly in a certain direction based on his intuition. Suddenly, Xiaohua's heart trembled. He recalled the place where he had first entered the defensive formation. Previously, when he heard Xiongyi's description, he subconsciously thought that he had entered the defensive formation directly like them. However, now that he thought about it, before he was surrounded by Taoist Huada and the others, he seemed to have stayed in a certain space for a short period of time. Moreover, that space also had a blood-red light, and it was extremely similar to the space he was in now. However, it didn't have much starlight. Thinking of this, Xiaohua suddenly raised his head to look at the starry sky. Sure enough, the ominous star with a tail was emitting a strange and mysterious light. The stars around this ominous star were abnormally resplendent, and this resplendent light was flashing with a bloody aura. One by one, the tails grew out of these stars. Needless to say, these stars should all be a part of this defensive formation. If others look at this place from the stars, they should also be a star that is also burning with brilliance. The space I entered earlier should also be a part of the defensive formation. However, that part is between the stars, or perhaps it's the fault of the defensive formation. Xiaohua suddenly realized, there. That's right, it's there. Since Xiaohua understood, it was very easy for him to find the place he came out from. Looking at the sky, there was clearly no mark. Even if one's divine sense swept over, it would be impossible to find that place different from other places. However, Xiaohua's eyes could see that it was the place he came from. Not good. Xiaohua identified the direction and immediately cried out bitterly in his heart, because that place was already on the verge of the collapse of the defensive formation. The blood-red clear stream in the space would annihilate his only way out in a few moments. Xiaohua activated the lightning escape technique without hesitation. Although the wind escape technique had the advantage in this short distance, Xiaohua understood that his cultivation of the wind escape technique was far inferior to the lightning escape technique. At this time, if he used his full strength, there was still hope that he could arrive before the space collapsed. Rumble. Tens of thousands of tiny threads of lightning appeared on the surface of Xiaohua's body. Xiaohua turned into a bolt of lightning and rushed towards the exit of the defensive formation. However, Xiaohua was already going all out. The nascent soul in his body was also rubbing its hands anxiously. Several bolts of lightning entered the void to help Xiaohua, but the blood-red stream soared into the sky. As long as it fell, Xiaohua's path of survival would be cut off. Although it was not certain that Xiaohua would die, the chances were slim. Confucian cultivator Xiaohua, quickly help me. At such a critical moment, Xiaohua's heart suddenly brightened, and he cried out in his mind, "Little Shang is coming." Confucian cultivator Xiaohua waved his hands, opened his mouth, and recited, "Drums and thunder resound. Swords and spears tremble in the wind and frost. For generals admonish, 10 generals start first." As soon as this inexplicable poem came out, it immediately turned into a bolt of lightning condensed from armor inscriptions. Inside Xiaohua's lower dantian, the 5 qi righteous thunder immediately rolled. Following this bolt of lightning, it rushed into Xiaohua's body and fell on the surface of his body. Boom! Xiaohua felt his body become light. A feeling of soaring immortality arose spontaneously. Immediately, Xiaohua's speed suddenly increased by several times. Like a stream of light, he rushed into the sky without anything special. -13. Chapter 36:30. What's especially strange is that Xiaohua's entire body immediately disappears where he landed, only leaving behind faint lightning threads at the edge of the void. Those lightning threads only flashed for half a second before the bloody stream fell, and all the lightning threads were torn apart. The space also shattered. Damn it! So close, a passageway like a pillar of light appeared in front of Xiaohua. Without Xiaohua activating the lightning escape technique, his entire body began to flow in the passageway. However, the pressure in the passageway was abnormal, and there was also a rapid tearing force, causing his body to be pulled out of shape. Xiaohua activated his magic power to resist, feeling extremely lucky in his heart. If I didn't use the 5 qi righteous thunder to activate the lightning escape technique, not only would it be impossible for my lightning escape technique to reach the realm of leaping thunder, it would also be impossible for me to break free from the defensive formation. Woo! Just as Xiaohua changed his mind, the pillar of light disappeared again. Xiaohua's body lightened, and he looked around again. Sure enough, all around him was crimson red light, not a single star. Phew! Xiaohua let out a long sigh of relief. Previously, He used all his strength to activate the lightning escape technique and forcefully rushed into the realm of leaping thunder 3 realms. His entire body showed a kind of fatigue, as if the realm of lightning escape technique's 3rd grade was far from what a Yuanian cultivator could control. However, just as Xiao Hua let out a sigh of relief, a gust of wind rolled up beside him and what he had experienced before happened again. Damn it, can't you let me breathe a sigh of relief? Xiao Hua sensed that his entire body was bound by a powerful force and knew that the fault in space didn't allow cultivators to stay. He couldn't help but smile bitterly and curse. When the force disappeared, Xiao Hua opened his eyes and saw everything in front of him clearly. He couldn't help but exclaim in a low voice, not to mention that Xiao Hua had just escaped from the wolf's den and entered the tiger's den. The embarrassed Hua de Zhenren was forced to take out the jade pendant by Xiao Hua. He spat out a mouthful of true qi and layers of inscriptions gushed out from the jade pendant to cover him. Soon after, a pillar of true qi emerged from the void and carried Hua de Zhenren into it and disappeared. When the pillar of true qi disappeared, Hua de Zhenren's figure appeared above a layer of blood-red clouds. The blood-red clouds looked like cotton wool that covered the sky. There was no end to it at all. Above the clouds, there were groups of immortal soldiers in bright armor patrolling the area. As soon as Hua de Zhenren revealed himself, he immediately attracted the attention of the nearby immortal soldiers. The leading immortal soldier held a sickle-like weapon in his hand and shouted, "Where did this cultivator come from? Is this a place where you can break in?" Cough, cough. Taoist Master Hua de coughed twice. He raised his eyes to look at this group of 3rd-grade origin energy immortal soldiers. Raising the jade pendant in his hand, he indifferently said, "This old man is a star general under Hall Master Kong. It is precisely on the Hall Master's orders to enter the Jade Pavilion meeting. Your humble servant greets, Sir Star General." The captain's eyes lit up when he saw the jade pendant in Hua de Zhenren's hand. He immediately became respectful and clasped his hands. "This is my duty. I hope Sir can forgive me." "Yes, I understand." Hua de Zhenren put away the jade pendant. Raising his eyes to look all around, he asked, "If this old man is not mistaken, this place is Star-Lord Wellwood Sprite Shangguan Yuran's jurisdiction. Quickly bring me to see Star-Lord Shangguan Yuran." "What Sir said is correct. This place is precisely General Wellwood Sprite's jurisdiction." That immortal soldier saw Hua de Zhenren was very familiar with the Jade Mountain Range. His last doubts were all gone, and he hastily replied, "However, General Wellwood Sprite has already perished inside the array. Now, General Wood Dragon is in charge." "What? Sir Shangguan, he truly has fallen?" Hua de Zhenren turned pale with fright, practically shouting in disbelief. Who has such magic energy?" However, when he asked this, Hua de Zhenren suddenly thought of something and hastily shouted, Quickly bring me to see Sir Linghu." Quickly. That immortal soldier's face showed a difficult expression, and he said in a low voice, "Sir Star General, your humble servant is here to patrol. Without Sir Star General's orders, I absolutely do not dare leave. Furthermore, my Wellwood Sprite Star Array brothers have only recently come into contact with Sir Linghu. Your servant does not dare." "Impudent!" Hua de Zhenren furiously roared. "This old man has an important matter to report to Hall Master Kong. This is an urgent matter. If there is a delay, can you bear the responsibility?" This. The immortal soldier hesitated and hastily asked, "I wonder what Sir's important matter is. You are not qualified to know." Hua de Zhenren sneered, "However, this old man can reveal a little. If this matter is not false, it should be related to the fall of General Wellwood Sprite." "Good, sir. Please follow your humble servant." When the immortal soldier heard that it was related to Shangguan Yuran's death, he did not dare to be negligent. He hastily ordered the rest of the immortal soldiers to continue patrolling. He took out a flying boat and placed it in the air. He invited Hua de Zhenren to board the flying boat, and he himself drove the flying boat to rush into the clouds. The flying boat produced clouds and carried the two of them to a place at lightning speed. Above the crimson clouds, there were many patrolling immortal soldiers. There were also many immortal generals riding flying beasts and patrolling everywhere. Hua de Zhenren, standing on the flying boat, naturally attracted the attention of the patrolling immortal soldiers. However, the immortal soldier driving the flying boat took out a small triangular flag from his bosom and stuck it on the bow of the boat. Those immortal soldiers and immortal generals who were about to fly over stopped. After the time to drink a cup of tea, more and more soldiers and horses appeared in front of them. Moreover, there was a row of tents above the clouds. The immortal soldier did not dare to drive the flying boat again. He asked Hua de Zhenren to disembark from the flying boat and said with a smile, "Sir, please wait a moment. This is the border between Wood Spritewell and Wood Dragonhorn. This humble servant does not dare to cross. Sir Linghu should be in the barracks. This humble servant will send a message." After saying that, the immortal soldier pulled the triangular flag from the bow of the boat. He opened his mouth, and a mouthful of true qi fell on the triangular flag. The small flag turned into a streamer of light and disappeared into the barracks. A moment later, a tall, immortal general flew out from inside the barracks. In his hand was that triangular flag. Looking at the immortal soldier and Hua de Zhenren, he coldly said, "Who are you waiting for to issue the command flag? Is there some urgent military matter?" Reporting to Sir, this humble servant is Wood Spritewell's 13 Barracks 7th Squad Captain, Zhou Hong. The command flag was issued by this humble servant. That immortal soldier hastily bowed and saluted. "This is Hall Master Kong's Star General. He has news of the death of our Wood Spritewell's general." You and the others follow Mojia. When that immortal general heard this, he did not dare be neglectful. Turning around, he brought Hua de Zhenren and Zhou Hong to fly into the barracks. Entering the barracks, Hua de Zhenren's gaze swept around. Seeing the murderous aura all around and many unkind gazes looking at him, he could not help but sneer in his heart. His arrogant gaze swept back one by one, forcing those immortal soldiers and immortal generals to look elsewhere. Humph, no more than Origin Energy 3rd or 4th grade strength. Yet you unexpectedly dare provoke this old man. If it was not for the Jade Mountain, Hua de Zhenren was defeated again and again. His heart was very sullen. Naturally, he would not put these cultivators with lower cultivations in his eyes. His heart secretly pondered. Not long after, that immortal general brought the two of them directly to the center's largest tent. "You and the others wait here," that immortal general indifferently instructed. He himself was about to enter when the Hua de Zhenren to the side raised his hand. Holding a jade pendant in his hand, he smiled and said, "I have the Hall Master personally bestowed the Star General writ. I can directly meet any general below the Hall Master. I think we don't need to wait outside the tent. My general's military orders are strict. Unless the Hall Master personally comes, or the Hall Master's personal secret order, no one can approach the Central Army tent." That immortal general glanced at Hua de Zhenren and proudly said, "Not to mention, although you are the Hall Master's Star General, you have the identity of a Taoist cultivator. How could I dare to let you and the others in?" Impudent! Hua de Zhenren was ashamed and angry. He shouted, "Hall Master's Star General writ is useful in the entire hidden immortal continent. How can it not be useful in your Wood Dragon's camp? What intentions do you all have? Do you all still place the Hall Master in your eyes?" Hearing Hua de Zhenren so arrogant, that immortal general's complexion slightly changed. Just as he was about to speak, a thunderclap suddenly sounded in his ear. "Impudent! Who dares to make a racket outside the Central Army tent? Where is the Minister of Justice?" When that immortal general heard, his face showed respect. He said in a low voice, "Reporting to General, it was your servant who brought." Not waiting for that immortal general to finish speaking, Hua de Zhenren immediately put on a smiling face and raised his voice. "Linghu Darren, your servant is the Hua de Star General under Hall Master Kong. Long time no see. Is General's style still the same?" And that voice was slightly surprised, but he saw the Central Army tent's tent door open. A 5 chi tall lean man wearing leather armor and holding a sword in his bosom walked out. Looking up and down, he coldly said, "Hua de Star General? Is it you who is making a racket in front of the Central Army tent?" Hua de Zhenren looked at that man, but he did not recognize him. He nodded and said, "Your servant is not making a racket. but your servant has the Hall Master's Star General command in his hand. Furthermore, your servant has information regarding Shangguan Daren's fall. I only ask you, is it you who is making a racket in front of the Central Army tent?" That man interrupted Hua de Zhenren, coldly saying. Hua de Zhenren looked at the man's cold expression. He could only brace himself and say, "Correct, just now, it was your servant." According to the 4th article of the military order, those who make a racket in front of the Central Army tent without reason will be beheaded without pardon. That man recited word by word. Immediately, he raised the sword in his bosom. Wong. The sword emitted a cold light, and the sword hilt again gave birth to inscriptions. When these inscriptions rolled, an ice-cold killing intent rushed forth from the surrounding barracks. This killing intent made Hua de Zhenren have no choice but to shrink his neck. Clang. The sword in the man's hand let out a cry. A cold light rushed out from the sword scabbard, directly slashing towards Hua de Zhenren. Even as strong as Hua de Zhenren was a late-stage nascent soul cultivator, in the instant the sword fell, the several chi of space around his body was completely confined. He simply did not have any possibility of dodging, as if he could only be tied up. Hua de Zhenren turned pale with fright. A brilliance flashed above his head, and his nascent soul rushed out. His hands rubbed together, and a brilliance was born, wanting to block the sword. Unfortunately, the sword was incomparably sharp. The brilliance was immediately cut in half by the sword's edge. -13. Chapter 36-31. Lord Linghu, Taoist Master Hua De's nascent soul shrieked. That voice carried a timid tone as he said, "Your humble servant has news of Lord Shangguan Yiran's fall. This is a major military matter. If you dare avenge a private grudge, delaying Lord Hall Master's matters, not to mention Lord Hall Master will not forgive you. Even you 28 star lords will fall one by one. Stop." A shout came from inside the tent. That man's sword stopped in midair as if cast from iron. Although Taoist Master Hua De's body could not budge, the cold sweat on his forehead was already dripping. "Let them in." Following the dignified voice from inside the tent, the man put away his sword and retreated to the side. That immortal general raised his hand and said with a fake smile, "Star General Hua De, please." Then, he threw the triangular banner to Zhou Hong and said, "You go in, too." Zhou Hong was very terrified. Taking the banner, he hastily saluted. "Your humble servant has been ordered by Lord Star General to send him here. Now, since Lord Wood Dragon wants to see Lord Star General, your humble servant should return to patrol." "Did you not hear Lord say to let you all go in?" The immortal general coldly smiled and said, "Yes, Lord." Zhou Hong did not dare argue. Answering, he hastily lowered his head and followed Taoist Master Hua De into the tent. That Taoist Master Hua De originally had an untamed heart. Now, he suddenly hung in suspense. He was Kong Hongwu's Star General. Although his position could not compare to Star Lords like Jing Mushuan and Wood Dragon, his position in Star Lord Hall was somewhat aloof. Ordinarily, he did not need to have any dealings with these Star Lords. However, he had interacted with Jing Mushuan a few times and was considered familiar. He actually did not have any dealings with Wood Dragon. However, he had heard Jing Mushuan talk about the Wood Dragon. Therefore, he knew that the Wood Dragon was Kong Hongwu's confidant. Jing Mushuan hadn't said anything bad about the Wood Dragon. However, the disdain in her tone was very obvious. But as long as one was human, there would always be preconceived notions. Admittedly, Taoist Master Hua De had never seen Wood Dragon before, but based on Jing Mushuan's words, he already had a somewhat bad impression of Wood Dragon. This time, he had heard that the Wood Dragon well had perished, and that the Wood Dragon horn had taken over. So, he couldn't help but feel a little indignant. Unfortunately, Taoist Master Hua De hadn't even seen the Wood Dragon yet. So, the army outside the tent had already given him a show of strength, and this had made him lose face. Moreover, he couldn't help but have a bad feeling in his heart when he heard that the Wood Dragon had given Zhou Hong money. Sure enough, when Hua de Zhenren entered the tent, he saw that the inside of the tent was very simple. Other than a jade table, there was a pot on it. There were a few ordinary-looking token arrows in it. It was the middle-aged scholar sitting behind the jade table. The Confucian scholar held an ancient book in his hand and was reading it with great interest. There was not a trace of any special aura around his body. Even his eyes that were staring at the ancient book and his hand that was holding the book, other than being especially long and slender, he was no different from an ordinary student. Hua Zhenren did not dare to be negligent. He walked to the center of the tent, clasped his hands, and respectfully said, "General Jin Yuda greets General Linghu." Zhou Hong behind Taoist Master Hua De hastily knelt down. His mouth trembled as he said in a low voice, Little Zhou Hong greets General." Who would have thought that Linghu Pairen wouldn't even respond? His eyes didn't even move away from the book. Taoist Master Hua De awkwardly clasped his hands and stood there. He was somewhat at a loss. He admittedly had practiced for thousands of years. But he was very clear in his heart that this Confucian scholar was not only older than him, but also stronger than him. Not to mention, there were many cultivators around the military camp who were on par with him. Therefore, he slightly clenched his teeth. He didn't withdraw his clasped hands and slightly bowed waist. Anyway, his etiquette was enough. He wasn't afraid of Linghu Pairen playing any tricks. In less than half a cup of tea's time, Linghu Pairen seemed to have finished reading a page. He naturally dipped his hand in some saliva and turned to the next page. At this time, he raised his eyelids. His pitch-black eyes swept past Taoist Master Hua De. Then, his eyes fell on Zhou Hong. He faintly said, "Zhou Hong, do you know your crime?" Little. What crime did this little one commit?" Zhou Hong was baffled. He forgot to kowtow and hastily asked, "You didn't abide by military rules. You didn't patrol within your own defensive area. You rashly brought a Taoist disciple to my Hornwood Dragon Army's camp. Isn't this a great crime of colluding with the enemy?" "See, sir." Zhou Hong was stunned. He looked at Linghu Pairen and then looked at Taoist Master Hua De. He shouted, "Although this sir is a Taoist cultivator, but he holds the Hall Master's Star General Command tablet. This little one has already examined it. There is no mistake. Moreover, this sir has news about Sir Well Mushua's death. He wants to report to the Hall Master about an important matter. This little one didn't dare to delay. So, this little one sent this sir over. General Linghu, is there some misunderstanding here?" Taoist Master Hua De also opened his mouth and said, "Although this general has never seen General, I can be acquainted with General Well Mushua. This is this general's Star General Command tablet. General, please take a look." Unfortunately, Linghu Pairen simply didn't pay attention to him. His gaze coldly swept past. That fierce gaze seemed to be able to penetrate Taoist Master Hua De's body. How can you casually make a racket in the military camp? Did this general allow you to speak? Taoist Master Hua De's hand once again froze in place, not daring to move. He was afraid to hear that, "Where is the army advisor?" Fortunately, Linghu Pairen did not call for the army advisor. Rather, he extended his hand, and from who knows where, he pulled out a jade pupil tablet and tossed it to Zhou Hong. He faintly said, "Take a look, yes?" Zhou Hong very carefully received it. Clear light flashed in his eyes, but a moment later, his face was deathly pale. Large beads of sweat dripped down his forehead. Immediately, he kowtowed, "General, spare me." This little one did not know that this sir's Star General Command tablet had already been abolished. This little one did not receive the order at all. "Where is the army advisor?" Linghu Pairen did not waste words, ordering, "Yes, sir." The army advisor's hand clasped a sword as he entered. Linghu Pairen took out a token arrow from the token pot and said, "Go investigate whether or not this Zhou Hong spoke the truth. If it is, see who dares to delay the military. Bring that person's head. If Zhou Hong is lying, bring Zhou Hong's head." After he finished speaking, an inscription flew out of Linghu Pairen's mouth and landed on the token arrow. That token arrow floated with a bloodlight and flew into the army advisor's hand. "Yes, sir." The army advisor received the order. He extended his hand and dragged the trembling Zhou Hong out of the tent. The pitiful Zhou Hong. Anyway it was put, he was still a third-grade essence energy cultivator, equivalent to a Taoist golden core cultivator. Now, he was taken away like a little chick. Hiss. Taoist Huda sucked in a cold breath. He understood in his heart that this was not Linghu Pyron trying to intimidate him. Rather, he had rashly entered Yaodai Mountain, offending Kong Hongwu. Thinking of Linghu Pyron's ruthlessness, Taoist Huade did not dare say a word. He only clutched the Star General Command Tablet that he had previously been proud of. Now, it had already become trash. He calmly stood there, the veins on his hand slightly protruding. You are now a Taoist cultivator. According to my military discipline, trespassing into my army is to be beheaded. Linghu Pyron set down the scroll in his hand and indifferently said, however, you were previously Lord Hall Master's Star General. You have made some contributions to my Star Lord Hall. I cannot arbitrarily decide. Phew. Hearing this, Taoist Huada's hanging heart immediately settled. The veins on his hand disappeared, and he hastily bowed. Many thanks for General Linghu's tolerance. Would Lord Hall Master? Linghu Pyron rose and walked to the front of the command table. He fished out a diamond-shaped command tablet from his bosom and used his hand to pat the top of his head. 3-colored true chi bubbled forth, falling onto the command tablet. The command tablet gave birth to an auspicious cloud that floated behind the command table. Immediately, a wisp of overwhelming chi emerged from the void and gathered above the auspicious cloud. In an instant, Kong Hongwu's figure appeared. This general greets Lord Hall Master. Linghu Pyron bowed in salute. Taoist Huade did not dare be neglectful, also saluting. This general greets Lord Hall Master. Kong Hongwu waved his hand and said, Linghu, rise. Yes, Lord. Linghu Pyron straightened up, no longer speaking. Kong Hongwu's gaze swept past Taoist Huade and coldly said, This old man is Star Lord Hall's Hall Master, but you are not Star Lord Hall's Star General. There is no need to call yourself this general. This old man knows that my Star Lord Hall's temple is small and cannot accommodate a great deity like the Taoist. The Taoist can freely search for his own destiny on this Jade Mountain. Lord Hall Master. Taoist Huada's face was deathly pale. He said in a low voice, This old man knows that he has disturbed Lord Hall Master's plans. This crime cannot be forgiven. This old man does not seek to obtain Lord Hall Master's forgiveness. This old man only wishes to report a few secrets that this old man knows to Lord Hall Master. Afterwards, this old man himself will enter the array to meet his death. Speak. Kong Hongwu's face was still calm as water as before, indifferently saying, Taoist Huade did not dare beg for forgiveness too much, nor did he dare speak of his previous contributions. He was afraid that Kong Hongwu would not give him the chance to speak. Now that he was allowed to speak, his heart was already secretly delighted. He hastily said, Good, Lord Hall Master knows. This old man discovered a cultivator who concealed his cultivation at the Jade Pavilion gathering. Furthermore, this old man previously knew that General Jing Mushuan fell inside the Imperial Array. In all likelihood, Lord Hall Master has not yet found the true culprit, so this old man braved death to report to Lord Hall Master. Who? Kong Hongwu's brows trembled. It was as Taoist Huada said. In his fury, Kong Hongwu already dispatched people to begin investigating the truth. However, the entire Jade Mountain was inside the Great Array. Especially after the array changed, with Jing Mushuan falling, the immortal soldiers and immortal generals in the Star Array were already somewhat disorganized. The news of Taoist Huada's Star General token being crippled did not reach Zhou Hong's place. This was clear proof. Furthermore, the immortal generals that had seen Xiao Hua were more or less killed by Xiao Hua. Kong Hongwu honestly could not find the Xiao Hua that killed Jing Mushuan for the time being. Xiao Hua. Taoist Huada did not dare beat around the bush, directly saying Xiao Hua's name. As expected, it was him. Kong Hongwu's eyes slightly narrowed, as if this did not exceed his expectations. Furthermore, Linghu Pyron's brows rose, his eyes flashing with a strange light. Taoist Huada was slightly startled. This information was his final straw. Now, it seemed that it truly was a straw. He hastily shouted, Lord Hall Master is wise. It is Xiao Hua. -13. Chapter 36-32. Hearing Taoist Master Hua to be so certain, Kong Hongwu looked at him with interest, indifferently asking, "How do you know?" Taoist Master Hua was delighted in his heart, hastily recounting Xiao Hua's actions in detail. Finally, he added, "This one heard that General Shangguan was killed, and Xiao Hua just happened to be nearby. This guy is most adept at hiding his cultivation. This must be his doing." "Linghu, what do you think?" Kong Hongwu seemed to have thought of something, unexpectedly smiling as he asked Linghu Pairen. Linghu Pairen glanced at Taoist Master Hua, bowing to Kong Hongwu. This one is more interested in Xiao Hua, however. It seems that there is already no meaning now. This one will personally kill him. Use his head as a sacrifice to General Shangguan. This one is also willing to atone for his crimes and assist General Linghu in killing Xiao Hua to avenge General Shangguan. Taoist Master Hua De immediately seized the opportunity, bowing as he spoke. "Atone for your crimes?" Kong Hongwu coldly looked at Taoist Master Hua, not knowing what he was thinking. Just at this moment, the Linghu Pairen to the side suddenly interjected, "Lord Hall Master." Although Star General Hua was momentarily bewitched by the treasure, seeing as he has done many things for my Star Lord Hall over the years, even if there is no merit, there is hard work. Furthermore, he entered the Jade Pavilion gathering, and by a freak combination of factors, he brought such important news to my Star Lord Hall. In this one's opinion, it would be better to let him go kill Xiao Hua to atone for his crimes. "Good." Kong Hongwu slightly nodded, saying, "Jin Yuda, if you can kill Xiao Hua, this old man will withdraw this order. You will still be my Star Lord Hall's Star General. Furthermore, if you can reach a higher level of enlightenment and refine your fire chi Chaiyuan to the realm of 5th rank origin energy, the position of Wellwood Dragon is not necessarily yours." Many thanks, Lord Hall Master." Taoist Master Hua was overjoyed, hastily bowing in salute. "This one will not disappoint Lord Hall Master. Go. This one awaits your good news." Kong Hongwu waved his hand and said, "Yes, Lord Hall Master." Taoist Master Hua rose, and Linghu Pairen earnestly said, "Star General Hua, this is your last chance. You must seize it. Once you leave the tent, there will be soldiers to escort Star General back." "Thank you for your mercy, sir. I will repay you in the future." Hua Taoist cupped his hands towards Linghu Pairen and turned to leave the tent. Before the soldiers came to lead him, Hua Taoist saw that the adjunct who had just walked out of the tent had landed on a flying boat. In his hand was the head of an immortal general. From the looks of it, it was not Zhou Hong. When the adjunct's gaze swept over Hua Taoist actually felt a slight chill on his neck. Inside the large tent, Kong Hongwu saw Taoist Hua leave. He looked at Linghu Pairen with a smile and asked, "Linghu, I didn't expect that Xiao Hua to be so powerful. Even Taoist Hua isn't his match. It seems that I'm going to lose the bet with you earlier." Linghu Pairen also withdrew his previous seriousness and said with a smile, "Could it be that my lord already knew of Xiao Hua's prowess and expelled Taoist Hua from the Star Lord Hall first?" "Humph, this evil creature." Kong Hongwu snorted from his nose. "He actually dared to disobey my arrangement and enter the Jade Pavilion meeting without permission. He deserves to be punished. Furthermore, he's still so bold at this time, wanting to borrow the hand of my Star Lord Hall to kill Xiao Hua. Could it be that he feels that I can't see through his thoughts?" Linghu Pairen nevertheless smiled and said, "It's true that he didn't listen to the arrangement. It's also true that he wanted to borrow the Jade Pavilion meeting to accumulate his own power. But if he wanted to borrow the Hall Master's hand to kill Xiao Hua, that might not necessarily be the truth. He merely walked through a few defensive arrays. How could he know that the cultivators nearby were powerful? According to his thinking, the only one who could kill Shangguan Yuran could only be Xiao Hua. He was forced into a corner by Xiao Hua and used the Star General command plate bestowed by the Hall Master to break free of the defensive array. Hearing that Shangguan Yuran was killed, he naturally wanted to claim credit. Of course, he must also be nervous in his heart, afraid of being punished by the Hall Master. "You don't know how bold he is." Kong Hongwu shook his head and said, "Didn't you hear? He actually covets the position of Star Lord. Such an important position of my Star Lord Hall. Can it be left for him?" A single Jade Pavilion meeting will undoubtedly reveal the greed of Tao sect cultivators. Those with low cultivations want to obtain spirit herbs from the Jade Pavilion meeting. Those with suitable cultivations want to obtain the lot of the state preceptor. Those with high cultivations want to accumulate their own power and obtain strange treasures. They are fully aware that the Jade Pavilion meeting is controlled by my Star Lord Hall and that there is only a slim chance of survival. But for their greed, they did not hesitate to swallow the bait. Men die for wealth, and birds die for food. The ancient saying is true. Hehe, what Lord said is true. But if Huodo wants to become a Star Lord, he must first think of escaping from Xiao Hua's hands. Linghu Pyron narrowed his eyes and replied, borrowing a knife to kill. Linghu, your calculations are quite shrewd. Kong Hongwu said with a smile. It's all thanks to Lord Hall Master's guidance. Linghu Pyron said with a smile, fighting with Tao sect cultivators is not about strength, but about methods. It's endless fun. Are you not interested in this Xiao Hua? Kong Hongwu said, hearing Huode's words, this old man wants to personally see this Tao sect cultivator valued by Grand Mist Ancestor. Grand Mist Ancestor? Linghu Pyron raised his eyebrows and said indifferently, since we can't accept him as a star general, we can't let him leave the Jade Pavilion Mountain. This general is naturally very interested in him. Ha ha ha, if you want to make a move, you have to wait until Xiao Hua escapes from Huoda's hands alive. Kong Hongwu laughed. Unfortunately, this sun, moon, and star 3 arrays can't compare to my Star Lord Hall's previous Imperial array. It's difficult to see the situation everywhere. Otherwise, this old man really wants to see the liveliness inside now. Although Xiao Hua is powerful, he can't be considered outstanding. Hearing Tail Fire Tiger Ouyang Jingran's message, as soon as the star array came out, she had an extremely powerful person gather over 100 Tao sect cultivators and kill many dissatisfied cultivators to obtain 70% of the treasures. That cultivator is called Master Sun Kong. He's a proud and arrogant person. Kong Hongwu naturally knew. He nodded and said, presumably, you also know this person. Tao sect cultivators often use the titles Child and Taoist Master. He disdains them and calls himself Master. His arrogance can be seen. So, Ouyang wants to subdue him and make him a star general. Impossible. Kong Hongwu shook his head. Previously, this old man also sent people over. This bastard simply didn't buy it. Star Sun Horse Taisher Zhanran also has a Zhang Daoran. Now, he also stands out. Linghu Pyron said again. Kong Hongwu shook his head again. Although this Zhang Daoran didn't establish a country and is considered a Tao sect disciple indifferent to fame and fortune, he is extremely famous in Jingzhou. Long before this old man recruited Huoda, I personally visited him. Unfortunately, I didn't meet him. This time, he can come to the Jade Pavilion gathering. I'm afraid it's related to that green nether dragon saliva. This kind of thing that even Huade doesn't listen to orders is absolutely tempting in the eyes of other Tao sect disciples. Hall Master is right. According to Taisher, that Zhang Daoran was recognized by Jingzhou's Tao sect disciples and was elected as their leader. Even if he wanted to decline, he couldn't. If nothing unexpected happens, he will ultimately run into Master Sun Kong. No, he should run into Star Plucking Child first. Kong Hongwu smiled. Star Plucking Child? That Yongzhou's Tao sect genius known to be the closest to out-of-body formation? Hearing Star Plucking Child's name, even Linghu Pyron's expression changed. He unexpectedly also came to the Jade Pavilion gathering? AI, not bad. Kong Hongwu sighed. This old man is Star Lord Hall's Hall Master. Unexpectedly, I didn't even know that Star Plucking Child sneaked into Jade Mountain. This is truly a dereliction of duty. This isn't strange. Tao sect magic is strange of every description, far surpassing what we Confucian sect cultivators learn. Linghu Pyron smiled. Unfortunately, Tao sect magic inverts the cart before the horse. They only seek power but do not know their roots. They are far from the vast and majestic qi of our Confucian sect cultivators. Although Star Plucking Child is known to be a rare genius, compared to Hall Master, he is still far inferior. Don't compare this old man with those little dolls. Kong Hongwu didn't get angry and smiled. This old man is going. If you want to deal with Xiaohua, you must be careful. If he can kill Shangwan, he can also kill you. You can't be careless. Many thanks for Hall Master's reminder. This general will be careful. Linghu Pairan bowed. Jingmu Bao and the other soldiers are unconvinced in their hearts. If this general doesn't kill Xiaohua and the others, how can they be convinced? After sending Hall Master off, this general will go take a look. Kong Hongwu nodded slightly. Thousands of whirlpools swirled around his body. His entire body turned into nothingness. Along with a burst of qi, he gradually disappeared. After Kong Hongwu left, Linghu Pairan straightened up and walked out of the command tent. His gaze swept over the bloody head on the flagpole outside the tent. His figure floated up, crossing several rows of allied forces, and arrived at a place covered in clouds. Linghu Pairan spat out a mouthful of true qi. The clouds within a radius of several dozen zhang were pushed aside, revealing a space covered in starlight. Looking at the several brilliant stars, a trace of a mysterious smile appeared on Linghu Pairan's face. As for Xiaohua, he flew out from the void. Seeing the situation in front of him, he couldn't help but exclaim in a low voice. This was a huge sphere. Although only half of it was visible in the sky and the lower half couldn't be seen, this half was already so big that Xiaohua couldn't see its edge. When Xiaohua looked at the outside of the huge sphere, he saw a long, flat ribbon-like object surrounding the sphere. The ribbon looked fixed, but upon closer inspection, it was slowly rotating. When Xiaohua realized that his divine sense was not restricted in this place, he activated his divine sense again. He discovered that the ribbon was actually made up of huge rocks. If the huge rocks were on flat ground, they would be as big as a mountain. Xiaohua's divine sense was not restricted in this place, but when he activated his divine sense again, he discovered that the ribbon was actually made up of huge rocks. If those huge rocks were on flat ground, they would be as big as a mountain. Although this magnificent scene was astonishing, it wasn't enough to make Xiaohua exclaim in a low voice. Xiaohua was the most shocked because the scene here was quite similar to the scene when he accompanied Fairy Hongxia to see the Kai family's ancestral shrine in Million Ming Mountains. Star, moon, starry sky. Could it be that there's a big secret hidden in it? Seeing the starry sky, Xiaohua couldn't help but be surprised. -13.